neighboring property owners and the larger community. We'll start the evening, as we always do, with an introduction of the commissioners.
Wells Wheeler.
Susan Athenson.
John Travers.
Kurt Pairitz.
Mary Ellen Swenson.
Jim Preschlack.
Robert Alfe.
And I think we have introduction of the staff this evening as well.
I'd like to introduce our new assistant planner, Kate McManus. She joined us last week. I think she'll bring a lot of good things to the Historic Preservation Commission. And I'm Kathy Cerniak.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Kathy. Kate, welcome aboard. All right, we have meeting minutes here to consider. They are from the November 19th meeting. Ask the commissioners if anyone's had a chance to review these or if there's any comments, questions, or other remarks.
Yeah, I have an addition to November.
Okay.
Let's see, what page is this? Oh, page 12. I do need my glasses. Let's see, Kathy, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth paragraph. Could you just add a little sentence at the end? I can give you this later, but I'll just read it. Commissioner Athenson encouraged the petitioner to replace the ephes stucco with cement stucco in the future when funds are available in order to match the historic original cement stucco.
I can attest that that happened.
I know. Makes it a little bit more forceful, right?
Any other comments or remarks or questions?
I did have one comment, and I believe this is for the November 19th, 2014 minutes. And this is on 20 East Laurel. And I'm not entirely sure how you'd want to incorporate this in the minutes or if it needs to be incorporated in the minutes, but I wanted to bring to your attention that I believe that in my comments on the historical materials to be deposited with the city and the Historical Society, subject to city approval for the purpose of documenting the existing home at 20 East Laurel and its history for the city archives, I specifically mentioned inclusion, if practical, of a facsimile of the memoir and related art of former resident Marion Phelps Douglas, as this is a unique historical record. And I don't know how you want to handle that in the minutes, but I do think it would be great if the city staff kept this in mind as they approved the historical materials to be preserved in the city archives.
All right, Kathy, you got that? And any other comments or questions? Is there a motion on these minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
All right, there's a motion been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by everybody. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? There we go. Okay, thank you for catching up on that meeting minutes, and we have more to come, I think.
Are we going to do the 28th? Or?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a second one? Did I miss him?
28th.
There's January 28th.
Pardon me. Well, I don't believe I ever saw those. Anybody got any comments on January 28th while I peruse quickly?
I did not.
Okay, I'll ask if there's a motion for the January 28th meeting minutes.
I move we approve.
The motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
And so made by Preschlack, seconded by Swenson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, wrong Swenson.
Wrong Swenson. It's the Athenson.
Athenson.
Oh, no.
Late, snowing. We've only started. It's still passed. All right, thanks for the patience on that, guys. Our first agenda item, our real first agenda item, is agenda item 3. It is a request for a consideration of certificate of appropriateness for 425 Woodland Road for one-story addition to the rear of the residence. So I'll ask if any of the commissioners have any conflict or ex parte contact on this. I see none, so come on up and tell us what you got.
Good evening. My name is Austin DePree. I'm representing the owners, Dave and Avery Keller. Dave's with us this evening, and we've been working on this project in conjunction with Craig Bergman Landscape Design. What you see on the screen here is the original historic drawing for 425 East Woodland. It was built in 1922 by Alfred Menier. In 1923 and 1925, there were subsequent additions and alterations by the same architect that I'll point out later in the presentation. But you'll see, looking at photographs, the overall character of that front facade has remained, but there have been a few significant alterations and additions made to the home already. In terms of location, this is Woodland Road here. So the house is right at the corner of Wisconsin and Woodland, Sheridan Road running north-south here. Some existing context photographs. This photograph here, taken from the northeast, you'll recognize the original massing of the house with a later addition here on the left-hand side by Tom Reikovic in 2005. The photograph to the right, this is a later edition. I believe this is the 1923 edition by Alfred Menier, and then a view from the west looking at that same edition. The bottom photograph really illustrates a view where you're going to be able to see the small 300 square foot addition that we're proposing tonight. The next photograph really illustrates how private and secluded this property is. Slightly over 2 acres and a relatively small footprint compared to many of its neighbors here. And again, in terms of what passersby will see, the addition that we're proposing will really be invisible. The next photograph showing a couple of houses in the neighborhood across the street. You can see kind of colonial revival style, both houses consistent with 425. Next slide shows a site plan. Sorry, this is small for people in the audience here, but and you can see, again, the relative size footprint of the house compared to the overall scale of the lot. And you can see here where we've got a slightly darker poche on the upper right-hand corner of the house where the addition is proposed. Existing footprint of the house. The addition proposed is back here, the upper right-hand corner of the house. And here you see the addition. Just to give everyone a little context, Dave and Avery lived in the house for a little over 3 years. They have 3 children. Their kitchen area, much like many older estates in Lake Forest, small with a very limited adjacent seating area. So they came to us and really wanted a proper mudroom. Again, 3 active children, and they wanted a casual dining space looking out into the back courtyard. So those are the spaces illustrated here. The only addition, if you can just follow my cursor, is the outline here. This space, the new entry, rear entry space, is built into existing footprint. The next slide illustrates the existing conditions of the elevations of all facades in its current state. This next slide here, highlighting in a lighter color, shows the additions from the 2 elevations that are visible. Start here on the top with the south elevation. This breakfast room addition is really a glass sunroom with an adjacent rear mudroom entry connecting to the garage. The slide below shows the west elevation. Again, this is an existing facade that was designed and constructed back in the mid-20s. The only change we're proposing is replacement of a double-hung window with a new entry door and flanking sconces. And then to the right of that, a very small addition reminiscent of some of the original porches found in the house when it was built in 1922. A small double-hung window and flanking shutters to match the historic shutters on the house. And then in the distance on the far right, you can see one bay of that glass room addition. Sorry, in the lower right, you can actually see the east facade of that glass addition. The architectural details and language of the addition, we tried to remain very consistent with those details found in the house. So, for example, from the west facade, the new addition that you see here really mimics the roof style and railing detail found in the house, again, designed by the original architect back in 1925. The last slide here just illustrates a perspective view. The top view, the existing conditions, existing carriage house, white lattice fence between the carriage house and main house, and then the slide below. Aaron from Craig Bergman's office will be speaking about the landscape buffering, but architecturally speaking, you can see the double hung window above that's being replaced with the new entry door, and then you can see to the right of that the new mudroom addition, and then beyond that, which is not visible from any public view, would be the glass sunroom breakfast room addition. That's it for the architectural presentation. I'll let Aaron come up here and finish off landscape.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Herrera with Craig Bergman Landscape Design. We've been working with Northworks and the Kellers in the development of the landscape, specifically around the addition. And how do we forward? Oh. Okay. Our landscaping is specifically outlined in this area in the front of the house where the addition will be most seen. No changes will be made to the existing driveway. There is an existing walk that connects to a backyard right now, and an existing patio that would remain as is. I'd like to draw your attention just to the line of an existing fence that locates right here that attaches to the existing coach house. And this is an increased view of that space that we were shown as highlighted to be worked on in landscape. The landscape design is very simple and complementary to the new architecture. A few elements of the new design includes a bluestone walkway that creates a new entrance to the door, and also a branch to the backyard and patio. There is the incorporation of a nice evergreen hedge that will create the illusion that this is the backyard. We're trying to make it sure that any visitor would know that the front entrance is a primary entrance, and by creating this hedge approach, it lessens the secondary entrance view for neighbors. Other things to keep in mind is we are providing screening for what is a new air conditioner and generator that the owners have requested. This is an existing oak tree that would be protected. We would work with an arborist for any work in the area around the generator. We are also showing two small landscape stone walls. All would be in keeping with the existing stone on the property. These are also views that Austin shown of the privacy of the property. It's in a woodland setting. No changes will be made. This shows some of the landscape walls that are on the front of the house, which would be, they're nice land and stone wall. They would be replicated in the new landscape areas. What we have shown here is that this existing fence that connects the current house to the coach house will be eliminated, which is a nice opportunity for us to provide more green space between the two architectural elements. The nice part about this landscape is with the removal of this fence, we really are able to kind of minimize the difference in angle between the main house and the coach house. which is really complementary to the new addition. All the existing trees, except for one redbud tree right here, would remain. And we will be providing additional screening for the front of the driveway and the garage. This is an existing tree that's complementary to the new addition. And what also is nice is that this hedge will kind of minimize the visual effect of this being a secondary door and create the visual that is almost more like a window. And that's all that we have for this evening. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be happy to address them.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have a staff report?
Sure. Not much of one. Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. That was a very comprehensive presentation. You also received quite a bit of information in your packet. I did want to point out that this house is significantly under bulk, over 1,000 square feet under bulk. And it really is even more because keep in mind that the square footage of the ravine area, the non-table land, counts only 50% toward the allowable bulk. So this house, the addition is certainly not increasing the mass beyond what would be permitted. You do have in your staff report findings in support of this project. Again, no variances are required or requested. And if you choose to do so, it'd be appropriate to approve it. Thank you.
All right, now it's an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions of either the staff or the presenter, if there are any questions.
Just have a question for Austin. Could you kind of elaborate on the choice of the siding on that addition? It seemed like the whole ground floor is in stucco with that exception.
Yeah, we looked through a lot of the historic photographs, or sorry, historic drawings of the house, and maybe just step back for a moment to the architectural. Around the back side of the house, it's not illustrated here, but there was a rear mudroom addition that had clapboard on the ground floor. So in this house, which I'd say is kind of an eclectic mix of different styles of the time period, I think part of the architecture was to create this very casual environment, and I think bringing clapboard down to the first floor in the back was part of that. So again, going back to comparing what exists now to what we're proposing, this is taken directly off of some historic precedents from drawings from 1922.
Any other questions?
It also kind of relates to the, just to the coach house a little bit, I mean, in terms of the synergy between those two, or did you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, the nature of this house, it's kind of reminds me of just a very organic evolution of a colonial revival style that's survived over 100 years. And I mean, frankly, from just an architectural perspective, wrapping that small addition in stucco just did not seem appropriate. A lot of the other stucco areas are bookended by coarse stone. The small addition, you know, obviously is not important enough to bookend with any other materials. So especially the clapboard material seemed to be kind of the more casual material on the house, signifying that it is really a secondary or tertiary element, which it is. It's a mudroom.
Austin, do you think there are any historical elements of the initial structure that are being compromised at all through the addition?
No, really, we're attaching to the house. We're not attaching to the original main body of the house. We're attaching this addition to what was one of the later 20s additions. So I feel like from the front facade, again, I think the facade that really characterizes the house, we're having absolutely no impact. And if you look at some of the rear facades here, there's quite a bit going on. I would say it's kind of a study of isolated symmetries. So we've tried to connect this addition as much as possible to the house. So you'll see here in the sunroom aligns directly underneath the double hung window above. Again, like many other parts of the house, there are axial connections, vertical axial connections, which we're trying to maintain with this addition. But I really feel like the scale of the addition is not competing whatsoever with the original massing and architectural feeling of the house.
Do you feel like if the homeowner decides to do something different in the future, because it is under bulk, that this would be compatible with other additions and designs and it's extendable?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine another piece being added to this house, but you know, I think if there was another significant addition, I mean, frankly, if you step back, I think this house represents what the Lake Forest really used to be in a bygone era. These beautiful country estates on very large parcels, and I think the current owner intends to be there for a long, long time and raise their children here. So, at least in discussions with them about you know, all the options of what they could do to the house, they're really concerned with trying to minimize the footprint and keep it small. So we're certainly not planning for any future phases here. We're thinking that this is the last capstone, and really just, again, trying to make it more adapted to current lifestyle where family spends most of their time in the kitchen and comes in the majority of the time through a back door.
One question, the footprint, I was out there today, it looks like it's under the drip line of that huge oak. I'm just wondering if that was a consideration, or did you notice?
Yes, definitely. And
that oak?
yeah, and I will, I'll let Aaron address that, but certainly I think for the owner, for Craig Bergman's office, for our office, the health and survival of this tree is paramount. So we've been talking about air spading, even for any retention walls around it, and we felt like the distance between the base of the tree and the house was very safe, but I'll let Aaron.
The owners have a relationship with Care of Trees and work with their arborists on a regular basis. So what we would be doing is providing root pruning for that tree, and we would be very mindful of any grading work that would occur around that tree. As well, for the Kellers, it's of great importance that it's maintained, and it's one of the most beautiful trees in that area of the property. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the,
I have a couple questions. if I
please?
may. I noted that on top of the sunroom, there's a railing, and I was wondering if it was intended that the top of the sunroom would be intended to be used as an outdoor space.
No, really. Currently, you can see here on the west elevation, we're mimicking a railing condition that exists over here on the north end of the house with the exact same roof profile, and it's really just a flat pan roof. I think it's more of an architectural folly. It's not intended to be a usable deck space, and I would imagine Dave wouldn't want his little kids out there anyway.
May I follow up and ask?
Yes, sure, of course.
In the event that someone decides to use it that way, will the railing comply with code for railings that would be installed in a place where people were going to be in a location like that?
Sure, and you know, I wasn't meaning to joke about that, but really there is no intention to turn this into a balcony. You know, just like the balcony over here, the railing's very low. I think if Dave and Avery ever did want to turn that into a deck space, they'd come back to the city and put a 36-inch guardrail, and make sure that structurally and in terms of the roofing material that it could hold up to being a deck surface. But right now, it is purely a flat roof, and I'll let Dave speak to maybe the future use of this.
Oh, please, please come on up, and unfortunately, we have guys at home, so if you could just introduce yourself. I don't mean unfortunately, there's guys at home.
Sorry, hi. I'm David Keller, the owner of the home, and the railings are very short, so I'm sure they're not up to code. So, and there is not a doorway that goes out there, and you know, we have a porch sort of deck area on the front of the house and another on the back. So, it hadn't even occurred to me to use them that way. In fact, there's a small air conditioner on the one that exists now. Hopefully, we can keep the other one free and clear, but. I hadn't thought of using it that way, and have no plans to.
Oh, yeah, no, kids sometimes have different ideas than we do, though.
Right, no, there certainly are windows, and,
All right.
I had another question.
Thank
if
you.
I may. Thank you
Go
so
ahead,
much,
John.
sir. I apologize. Oh, yes, the only other question I had was there any significant increase in impermeable surface area associated with this project?
Significant increase?
Yes, sir.
I would say, the 300 square feet on the overall acreage, of about 90,000 square feet is pretty minimal.
So it's about 300 square feet only?
Yeah, 306 square feet total. So I think in terms of impervious surface. Erin can speak to
The
that.
impermeable surface, there was a stone patio where the addition is right now, or being extended. So that was already in an impermeable surface. I would say the walkways were very minimal, if any, increase. So it was probably net, it's about the same as what it was originally.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, now's an opportunity for any public testimony, if there is any. Please come on up and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Linda Liang, and I live at 75 South Asbury Court, and I'm on the board of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, and I have a very brief comment from them that I'd like to read. We have no objection to the proposed addition. In the elevation, it is unclear what the material and design of the infill between the supporting posts and the new balustrade will be. This should be clarified. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for making the comment and coming out. Do we have a quick answer for that question?
I think the question was, what are the posts going to be made of in the balustrade? And they will be painted wood.
All right, and
Just
that's
to match
consistent
existing.
with the existing, yeah.
Right, to match the existing
Thank you.
balustrade on the front.
Any other public testimony? All right, I see none, so we can deliberate. Any deliberations?
Well, I'll just say, I think it was very nicely designed. It's integrated well with the architecture, and I think it's really actually something you really need. I think it's the one thing that's missing from your house, so I think it's a good project.
All right, any other deliberations?
I concur. I think it's a nice design, and as a footnote, I worked on this house in '93.
Oh, my
gosh.
Okay.
But it was just interior remodeling. We did the whole,
You get a pass for that.
increase the footprint.
Any other deliberations?
I just wanted to say that I found this to be a very complete and well-organized application package, which I really appreciate when I'm going through these things.
Yeah, I think the staff report just lays out that it conforms to the 17 standards that we need to consider as a commission, and complies nicely. And I think it's the kind of project that we should try to encourage in the community to increase the the livability of the homes, but also to continue to invest in the properties. So, in support of the project.
Terrific. Any other deliberations? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion.
I move that we grant a certificate of appropriateness to 425 East Woodland, approving one-story addition and associated alterations, including enhancement of landscaping in the vicinity of the addition, subject to the two conditions of approval in the staff report.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Preschlack. Is there a second?
Seconded.
And seconded, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes, so good luck, congratulations. Look forward to seeing the progress there. All right, our agenda item number 4, next agenda here is a consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness for 338 East Westminster, where we have a one-story addition to the rear of the residence, and a building scale variance is also requested. I'll ask if any of the commissioners, once again, have any conflict or ex parte contact. I see none, so come on up and introduce yourself and start when you're ready.
I'm Andrew Lind. My wife and I are the owners of the house, and I'm also the architect. This is going to be very brief. My overhead projector is not working, so I didn't have very much to show you anyway. But we're proposing a single-story family room addition.
Hey, Andrew, could I get you to just bend that microphone up a little bit? Again, once again, we've got, it's snowy, so not everybody came today. Half of them are watching from
Is that
home.
okay?
So thank you.
So we're proposing a single-story family room addition at the rear of the existing home at 338 East Westminster. The addition will be adjacent to the kitchen area and provide space for eating and other family activities. The addition will also function as a screened porch and a sunroom. The addition is located at the rear of the house and will only be minimally visible from the sidewalk and driveway at the southwest corner of the site. And it will be blocked from view by evergreen trees at the sidewalk on the southeast corner of the site. Neighbors to the west and east are screened by large trees on both property lines. The materials used on the addition will be the same as those used on the existing house. The height of the addition and its eave detailing will match the roof of the front porch. The front porch in addition will form bookends to the house, which I think will be a kind of a completing element and I don't know how to say that, but a balancing of the massing, I guess. And that's basically all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll see if there's a staff report.
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. This petition does require a building scale variance. The proposed addition is about 340 square feet, about 230 square feet of the addition will be over the allowable bulk. The current house is in compliance. There also is a detached garage at the north end of the property. After reviewing the criteria for a building scale variance, it does appear that this one-story rear addition does meet those criteria. As the property owner architect mentioned, the rear addition will not be visible from virtually anywhere off the site. There is a significant amount of vegetation, so you do have findings in your staff report that support approval of the addition as well as the building scale variance. And standard conditions of approval, nothing extraordinary is recommended. We certainly would want to work with them in protecting existing trees during construction. So you do have a recommendation in front of you in support of the petition.
So I just have a couple questions quickly for you, Kathy, on the measurements, if you will. I see actual design elements, 601 square feet of actual design elements and an allowance of, call it 400 for conversation. So 200 square feet of the design elements counts against their bulk here.
Correct.
Is that correct? And those are mostly the wraparound porch on the front of the building? Thanks. And then also the garage is also over the allowable, so that contributes to bulk as well. So between the design elements and the garage, that makes up more than the request for an overage.
Correct, but even with the additional square footage from the garage and the overage in the design elements, the house as it exists today is under the allowable bulk.
I see, I understand. Yes, thank you. I got it. Any other questions for the petitioners or the staff?
I had one question, and I just wanted to make sure that my understanding was that the increase in impermeable surface area would be equivalent to about the square footage of the addition. So that's about 300 square feet? 342 square feet. Thank you.
I have a question. I love this house, by the way. I live a few houses away, and I see it every day. It's a great house. I would like some more detail about the windows in the new addition. They look to be 5 panes wide at the top, but the details of the new windows just aren't there for me. I would like to see windows that are more in keeping with the rest of the house, and, you know, instead of being so
large.
Square,
Yeah.
more of the tall and thin variety?
Yeah. In fact, the largest standard double hung window that I can buy is 3 foot 5 inches wide, and I think I show those as 4 feet wide on the plan. So I was thinking that the standard window went up to 4 feet, but it goes to 3.5. So
I hear you.
I'm sorry. When I did the drawings, I thought a standard Marvin window went up to 4 feet wide, because I'm trying to get the largest windows I can, because it's going to be like a screen porch and a sunroom for us too. With the overhangs on the house, we don't get a lot of sun inside the house. So I was trying to maximize the size of the windows, but I realize now that the largest Marvin window in a standard form is 3 feet 5. So I'm going to change that. It's not going to be 4 foot wide windows. It'll be probably either 3 feet wide, or I might add a window on a certain elevation. Does that make sense?
How wide are the windows in the front elevation right now?
3'5".
3'5".
Yeah, those were the largest at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that all right? Kind of confused.
Other questions for the?
I have some questions. Well, this might be a weird question, but do you know if you make the ceiling 9 feet, do you know what the additional square footage would be?
No, I don't.
Because I'll tell you why I'm thinking about that. Because I was looking at the roof pitch on this addition.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really match the rest of the house. And I'm just wondering if it's really worth it not to add that additional foot in your ceiling, because you could increase the roof pitch and then you could elongate those windows and get the kind of shape you're looking for.
Yeah. If you look at the back on the rear elevation, you also have a problem interfering with the windows on the second floor of the master bedroom.
Okay.
So the pitch of the addition does match the porch pitch. It's 20 degrees. It's pretty shallow. So we're going to do a water shield over the whole area because it's so slight. Yeah, I would like a 9-foot ceiling. I'm just not sure I could fit it in. The other thing I was thinking about was creating a little bit of a pan ceiling on the inside, raising the cross joists up a little bit so that you'd have a slight chamfer there and then going to 9 feet. So
Yeah, because you worry with 8 feet.
8 feet for a room that size is low, I think. Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah. I mean, it might make it obsolete in a couple of years for you if you don't have
Yeah.
this 9-foot ceiling.
Well, I'd be happy if I can find a way to, if you agreed to see if I could get it up another foot, without interfering with those windows. That would be fine with me. I'd rather have the extra height.
Yeah, Kathy, do you know if he added a foot, how much square footage that would add to? I mean, I don't know the dimensions of the room, so how big is the?
I don't think it would add any extra height. I think it's, would it, Kathy, by going up another foot? I mean, add any extra square feet to the.
Like in the overage, in the bulk overage.
I can't tell you that off the top of my head.
Really?
It wouldn't be significant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, it's just something that I thought you might want to consider, just to improve a little bit of the design of the windows and give you some more breathing room.
I'd love to get permission to do that tonight, so I wouldn't have to come back to petition for a higher. But yeah, I mean, I understand it.
Okay.
Any other questions? I have one other question. How long have you owned this house?
We've owned it since 1992.
So you did an extensive renovation on the main bulk of this house.
That's
Very
right.
nicely done.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'll ask if there's any public testimony on this one.
Hello, I'm Linda Liang from 75 South Asbury Court. And again, I have a comment from the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. It's very brief, you'll be happy to hear. We support the petitioner's plan to add a family room to the rear of the home. It appears to be well-designed to be compatible with the existing house and the neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, now it's time for deliberations. I will say that I think that Commissioner Swenson had a good thought on the windows, in terms of the proportion of the windows on this, as they're drawn here compared to what's actually built. I think that there's probably some room for improvement there. And it sounds like there's going to be some improvement because you can't get them that wide anyway. But I think a little latitude, given the job that's been done to date on this home, is probably okay. And I would say we should probably empower the staff here, both in terms of the building height, whether it can be executed in 9 feet or 8 feet or 8'6" or some variation of that, as long as the spirit of the design is kept, and also the balance of the windows and how they're laid out. If 2 becomes 3 on the north end of this home or something like that, if it's, as long as it's consistent with the character. I think the home has been very well executed to date, and I'm confident that it'll continue to be. And so I appreciate the nature of this kind of schematic review. It's hard to pour too much heart and soul into a process that you don't know if you're going to get an approval on. So my advice would be to, any motion we make, if we do approve this, to give the staff some latitude on that. But otherwise, I don't have any other comments. Other deliberations from other folks?
Yeah, just to reiterate what I said, I think actually the 8-foot ceilings might, compromise the architectural integrity of that addition. I mean, you don't want it to draw away from the great job you've done turning this home duplex. I think it was a duplex to start out with, into this beautiful home. So, and I think it might take care of some of these issues we're talking about if you raise it. But I don't know how to build that into the.
Yep. I think fortunately we've got pretty shrewd staff here. I think they know when they're leaving the boundaries of what we're approving, and so they know when to bring it back to us and when to, if we need be, get a subcommittee involved if the change is more radical than modest little improvements to window sizing or home sizing. So I think if we give them that kind of latitude, we'd probably be okay.
Because even if they raise that ceiling 1 foot, it's still meeting 5 of the 6 criteria for a bulk overage, so
yeah,
it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Kurt, and in particular with the homeowners and the architect's discussion on the constraint of the second floor windows. I mean, I think that's really where the rubber will meet the road on that. And if we give them the latitude and they find an elegant solution that's compatible with the second story windows, but gives them a little bit, larger ceiling heights and. I think Mary Ellen's comment is a good one, and it sounds like if it's 3.5. And
so just to make that clear, the notion of the rear roof echoing the design and the slope of the front porch, I think is solid. That's reliable. You can that'll hold up in reality when you build that, and so that's great. Further flattening of that roof to achieve a 9-foot ceiling, I don't think is really what we have in mind here. So, again, the spirit of the design wants to be executed the way it's drawn. If there's room for a little bit of improvement, whether it's in the height of the building, spacing of the windows, I think that'd be great for the staff to administrate.
Kathy, do we have to put anything additional into the motion for that?
2 conditions that I think I heard you talking about. One would be a condition that directed some refinement of the window proportions. And the second would be consideration of modification to the height of the 1-story element in a manner consistent with the character of the overall home, or something close to that.
I just wanted to make one note, if I could, in consideration, which
Yeah.
is that the granting of or that is the recommendation of a bulk variance here under these circumstances where an owner may wish to update a residence to better reflect our current high standards of utility and comfort. And when the increase in bulk is not great, and when the increase in bulk is otherwise mitigated as addressed in some or all of building scale variance standards 2 through 4, that's very typical activity for us to recommend that to City Council, and it's very typical for City Council to approve that.
Thanks for noting that, and also it reminds me that my original thought on this is that one of the things that's driving this collective solution over bulk is this wonderful wraparound porch, and I think the bulk ordinance is a bit arbitrary with respect to how much credit you get for design features, but in this case, this is such an important design feature in this home. To me, I think this is, if somebody would take away the porch to add the addition, I would be really disappointed. So I think it's more
You know, it's
than.
interesting, at the BRB, you get that free, right? Don't they get design elements don't count towards their bulk, right?
The calculation is the same. You get 10% overage for design elements. And in this case, they use that 10% and the additional, I forget what the number was, the design elements that exceeded that 10% then are added to the main bulk calculation.
Got it, yeah. So you get some free.
All right. I'll ask if there's a motion.
I'd be glad to try a motion.
Give
Would
it
you
a-
like me
give it a
to
shot.
add in the proviso?
Please, if you
Okay.
could.
What I would say is that based on the findings detailed in the applicable staff report dated February 25th, 2014, which document that the project complies with the standards in Chapter 51, Historic Preservation of the City Code, and with the criteria for a building scale variance, and incorporating the materials submitted and presented by the petitioner and the testimony and the deliberations of the commission at this public meeting as additional findings, I move that the commission, A, grant a certificate of appropriateness for 338 East Westminster, approving the one-story rear addition consistent with the application and request presented to the commissioners by the petitioner. B, recommend that City Council approve the requisite building scale variance. And C, that we condition our approval on the conditions of approval enumerated in the two numbered paragraphs on page 5 of the applicable staff report. And D, that our action be subject to the proviso that city staff exercise latitude in permitting a possible increase in roof height or variance in scale and arrangement of windows.
All right, I'll let Kathy do the editorializing on that one to the
Sorry.
extent she needs to. Motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. All in favor say, oh, wait, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Swenson this time. All those in favor say aye.
Good job.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Congratulations, good luck with that. Look forward to seeing that move along. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 5. This is a consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness for Phase 2 of restoration and enhancement of Market Square. Phase 2 includes 3 separate sections: Northgate, storefronts at 672 and 724 Northwestern Avenue, and then the North Court area. So I understand that we're going to hear these in 3 separate presentations, and we will act independently on each one as we go. So without any further ado, I will say I believe that nobody can have a conflict because we've all seen this before in one form or another, and hasn't been there any ex parte contact? I say none, so please proceed at your convenience.
Hello, I'm Eileen Show with OKW Architects. I've been in front of you a few times already before. I have with me the owner of the property, Michael Schreiber, a partner in our firm, Mike Fitzgerald, who is a local Lake Forest resident, and he will be giving the part of the presentation on the design of the courtyard as well. Also working on our project are Mariani Landscaping, and I have Colleen Phillips with us as well to answer any questions. And our historic preservation architect is Ann McGuire from McGuire Igleski, and she is available for any questions regarding that part of our presentation. Let me go back to using the... All right, now that I'm acclimated again to the pointer. Actually, what just happened? There we go. The first part of the presentation, we're going to talk about Northgate. As you're aware, we've started to do the renovation of kind of the historic skins of the building that were in disrepair and trying to adjust those at the first part of our phasing that we started last year. Northgate is just an extension of that. This property was built in 1917 by Howard Van Doren Shaw, and it was the young men's club originally, with a gymnasium on the top floor and locker rooms and multi-craft rooms on the ground floor. It went through many renovations during its time, and probably one of the major buildings on the property that had a lot of improper renovations done over time. The image you see up at the top is actually when it was first constructed. As you can see on the ground floor, there were no entry doors except at the two ends, because that was the entrance to the gym, and the front were the locker rooms. I have another image here that I think is helpful. This is an image somewhere between the 30s and the renovation done in the 80s, where a majority of these windows were actually louvers, and some of the louvers were down on this floor, and on the north facade there were also louvers. In the 80s, John Vinci came through when the property was purchased by Broadacre and did a renovation of the facade. They reinstalled the windows to match the original design drawings that you see in the middle from Howard Van Doren Shaw. But because the ground floor was now retail, they designed new windows along the front. So what you see on the front of the building, on the west facade, are their interpretation of what this building might have been done to be renovated into a retail establishment. So all the doors on the front, as well as the windows in the bays, were a renovation done in the 80s. Some other elements that are unique to this building is the link between the two spaces. Originally, the Marshall Fields building on the top, the women's locker rooms were located on this side of the building, and you can still find the initials on the front of the building that tell you that it's the Women's Young Club. They were on this side, and they would cross over the bridge to get to the gymnasium. The link is still there, still in existence, and has some of the original windows still intact. Some of the other original elements to the building are some of the smaller windows off to the side that you can see in these elevations. The small ones off to the side are still original windows. The back of the building has substantially been infilled with masonry infills and hollow metal doors and frames over time. The work that we would like to do on this project is specifically related to the exterior. We're going to do the same thing we did to North and South Market Square, is to do some masonry restoration work. We have walked the building from ground level and determined that we need to do about 25% of the tuck pointing needs to be replaced or repaired, either A, due to deterioration of the original tuck pointing, mortar, which you will see is still evident in the piers. The areas of common brick have multiple different layers of mortar. Some are not doing so well, or they were poorly mortared in the first place and they stand out because they're kind of just buttered on the facade and they're a gray mortar as opposed to the white lime mortar that was used in the past. Our intent is to go through the building with our lifts and our scaffolds when we do the project and address any other cracks we can see from up above, but our estimate is about 25% of the facade will have new tuck pointing applied to the face. There's also some limestone sills that are deteriorating, need to be recaulked, and caused some cracking below. The existing lintels are all concrete, so they are in fairly decent shape. We will not have to do a lot of work with the lintels, but we will be inspecting them when we are have access to them. The second element that we're going to do is do repair and restoration to the existing windows. In this exhibit, you'll see where we're proposing the repair to the windows themselves, and then separately the doors. The existing hollow metal doors and frames, some of them are in bad shape and will be replaced as necessary, but they are recent additions to the process, and we'll be replacing them in like kind. The original doors along the front here have severely deteriorated from when they were built in the 80s, and some of these have to be completely rebuilt. But again, these were doors that were added in the 80s. Our intent is to take that design, replicate it in new wood. Some of them are completely rotted through on the underside due to exposure to moisture. The intent on the other windows is, again, a stripping, cleaning of paint, repairing and rotting of bad wood. We are not planning on taking them out and replacing them. We will be adding on the interior an interior storm detail that was on Vincey's drawings that appears to be missing to help with infiltration from the exterior of moisture and air. And these are just a few images of the state of the doors as they are now. The doors on the north and south will most likely be just a full repair, but as we take them off and detail them, they may go back to a shop to get the epoxy repair as needed or wood replacement. And the last element is the roof. We will be doing the same thing we did at North and South Market Square in terms of replacing the existing slate. You can see in some of these images is chipped and failed and very stained, starting to lose its layers as slate is supposed to do. And they've reached their 100-year average lifespan, 70 to 100 years, so they've done a good run. We're going to replace them with the same sort of tiles. In essence, it's the same blend that we've used at North and South Market Square that you've already seen us installed. We'll be putting in new copper flashing. We found evidence that on this building some galvanized metal was put in and then painted to look like copper. We are actually replacing it with copper on the ridges. The gutters and downspouts are copper, and we will just be replacing them in kind. The existing cupola, according to the drawings, was also galvanized iron steel. There's some renovation work done by Vincey in the 80s to repaint it. When we get a lift and more work up there, we're going to be doing some more investigative work. The idea in there is just to repair in place and to repaint with a color that matches a copper patina more appropriately, similar to the copper paint patinas that we've used on the other facades. The clock sundial, those are not actually copper, those are steel that were painted. And we found a color that was compatible, so if you want to go on site and look, they have the feeling of copper, but they're not. One of the things you can't do with time work, we understand, is copper and the patinaing will change how the movements of the clock would work. So they wouldn't want to have been designed in copper originally. So it's an interesting fact we found. The last part of it would be painting and stripping all of the woodwork and trim. We are going to match the same paint scheme that we had discovered at North Market Square when we had done our original analysis. So in the areas that you see green, you will see our green. You will see a lighter beige instead of a bright white. And I think you can just go and see the work that we've done last year to understand kind of the paint color schemes that would like to move forward on this part of the package. And that concludes our discussion of Northgate. And I think we decided we would break it out in sections so it would be easier to handle for questions.
So let's see if we have staff follow-up on this.
This work is very consistent with the work you previously approved for Market Square, so we do recommend approval, and I have no further comments.
All right, thank you very much. Opportunity for commissioners to ask questions.
Kathy, before we get into questions, can you just explain a little bit about the easement that's on this from, I can't remember who it is.
There is a facade easement on this building, and actually Eileen can probably speak to it more fully than I can, but it is held by Landmarks. You did receive a letter signed by Suzanne German, who used to sit here, noting that Landmarks has reviewed it. They are supportive of the project. And Eileen, if you want to add anything further on that.
Yes, we had our documentation and presentation a few weeks ago. It is a presentation where you are not there as the council meets. They asked us a few questions to send over specifications for the products we're using, which we sent over and have heard that they, as far as we understand, are acceptable, and they are in support of our work. And they would be involved in reviewing our specifications as well as we produce the documents, as we've done on the other projects. Mock-ups and specifications have already been sent to them because we're using the same slate and treatment that we did on the other property.
But how come this building has a easement and not the rest of the market? How did this happen?
The previous owner must have decided that this was a unique property, that an easement ordinance would be very beneficial to them. There is a either a tax credit or one-time donation that is used when you do an easement ordinance. I think the building is nicely situated to be that as such because it's just a single, it fits the property line now. There's really no room for additions. The exterior skin is works really well for what's going on at the time. So the ability to lock in that easement is a win-win for the owner at the time, and then it's now locked in that there's someone else reviewing all of the works to make sure that we're in compliance with the historic preservation. And it does have the unique ability of being kind of a freestanding element that there's not much more you can do to this building in general. No room for additions. It's got plenty of windows and front door access now, and that was probably why this building was chosen for that.
Another question about windows. When you inspected the second-story windows, did you find them to be acceptable? I know that you're saying repair and repaint, but are they all okay?
In general, from what we can see from the interior, we do know that there's some deterioration occurring because we can see the paint, and part of it is just understanding how much maintenance was really actually done to keep once the paint skin is removed and the wood is exposed, you start to have deterioration. We reviewed the documents and the drawings and matching the existing and felt that Vinci did a really nice job of replicating what was originally there. The wood that would have been used at that time is not as nice as some of the 100-year-old wood, so I think it's seeing some of a little bit of deterioration because of that. I also believe that there was just a lack of kind of proper maintenance in terms of scraping the paint and making sure it's solid. But in general, we think the windows are in fairly decent shape, and our hope is that we're just addressing some few minor areas where the glazing is tight and there's not as much wood.
How old are the second-story windows?
The second-story windows were renovated in the 80s by John Vinci. Okay. They were originally metal louvers, probably because it was a gym and they didn't like the sunlight, so they put operable louvers. And we have some of the drawings. It was in 1938 and 1960 that they did it, and we have an image from one of the books on Howard Van Donen Shaw calling it uglified. So that someone had pulled all those out and said, we don't want all this glass so close to the floor in a gymnasium. And they replaced it with a louver situation.
Can you talk a little bit about the trim paint color? Because currently there's different colors on all the windows. Do you intend to make all the windows and doors the same consistent paint color?
It would be the same consistent greens. So the palette that you see here, white. So the palette that you see here will be the consistent. This is our color that we use for the copper. And this is the jack pine, which you see predominant on North and South Market Square. It's not a hunter green like you see on Marshall Fields, but it's that lighter shade of green, and then you have the white. So consistently, everything will be these two colors in matching proportions.
So even on that front corner there on the top, with those white windows, they will be, white and green now?
Correct. We're going to match, we're going to make sure that we have a consistent look across the facades. I think a majority of these are all white, and then these are green with the white infill. Mm-hmm. And since this was kind of an 80s fabrication, the bays are very different from what was originally there. We're going to keep the intent aesthetically there. But these little smaller windows will be, some of those in the original pictures are all green. There is no white accent, so that they're not as, I think because they're smaller ancillary windows, there was no access. Looking at some of the old photographs in the black and white, you can see where the tones are the same, to judge where they've used the same greens, as well as we obviously can't take historic paint scrapings of these windows or the ones down below because they were added, but we have the ability on some of the older windows, as well as the rest of the property that was done at the same time.
So will the new doors look like the doors on the north and south? The new doors on the west side, I'm sorry, and the businesses on the front side?
On the west side, those doors are a little different. They're mostly all glass.
Right.
So they will be similar in style, but different because they have a much larger opening of glass. And I believe the door at Megan Winters is kind of a glass all the way down. So the same design will be taken across
So that's actually a black door with glass, and so she painted the
Correct.
original door black. So I have to ask it directly.
Okay.
Because we saw the request for Megan Winters, and it is the one petition in 6 years that I've gotten the most comments in the grocery line about. And I don't even go to the grocery store. So specifically, we had a split decision at the time. We allowed a change to the awnings and a change to the perimeter windows at the corner. It was not executed well, in my opinion, in terms of, you know, what we looked at in terms of the presentation versus what showed up in person is disappointing, because we had this kind of nicely, the character of the building was whole, and now it's bifurcated. I could say it a better way if I thought about it, but that's as good as I got. So people have approached me and not been happy about that. I agree in terms of the awnings at the very least, and so I have to ask you the question, what about the awnings? Do you have a plan in the future? What's the...
The awnings are something that we're looking at. Signage and the awnings is something that we're looking at for the whole kind of campus-wide, if you want to call the Market Square campus. And that is something that we're going to present on its own as part of our package for signing and awnings, because they are such a identity to this space, as well as trying to create cohesive. Instead of looking at each building, we've purposely left that off because it needs a lot more work and study and trying to understand how we are going to create something that allows for some flexibility for tenants, but also will look like it belongs on the building and was thought of as a proper design.
There you go. That was stated very well, and that was our intent when we passed this. We were sensitive to the fact that some tenants like to have some of their own identity, something distinctive, blah, blah, blah. I think it just, you know, the concept that the building has to hold together as a solution is,
Correct.
You know,
So our
paramount
plan,
in our mind.
so our plan is to create that cohesive package for what awnings can look like and the colors that they can be and the design for the brackets, so that there's a constant in what is going on with the building. And it is something that we are working on as a team to come before you in terms of a presentation on awnings holistically throughout the campus, as well as signage.
Good.
Great. Well, so awnings and signage to come, probably some other elements of the FF&E components as well. But with respect to this request, the painting will be executed in these colors on the right that would replace the colors on the left.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And those are the consistent colors with what's on the...
Correct. It's a
Other
consistent
part of the
palette that we
property.
developed originally in the project,
Which I think,
researching all of the historic findings that we presented last time with historic surfaces.
And in the same pattern, the green and
In the
white.
same patterns, correct.
Other questions for the...
I had another question. You know, on the north and south side, there are these little alcoves on the second floor
Correct.
that it looks, if you look in those historic photos, like there might have been sculptures up there.
We have not been able to find evidence of sculptures, but what we definitely will be changing is that those areas are painted green right now. And the reason I think they did that is because when the original building was stucco, those alcoves were brick that was exposed, so the vertical lines would be accentuated. When the stucco was removed, probably in the early 30s, or the whitewash, it loses the importance of what these are. So I believe Vinci decided we'll paint them green to keep the verticality. What we're recommending is that these are indeed painted white to better match kind of a limestone masonry feel, so that we still create the verticality that the original Shaw design was intending. And not to draw attention to it as a painted surface, to make it look more like a whitewash surface.
Okay, good. Yeah, that would be better.
So we have found no evidence that there are statues there. We've asked the same question. His daughter was a sculptor, and there are many sculptures around the property, but have been able to find no evidence of what the intent of those were. I think you can best see it here, that they do stand out differently when they are a brick against a white background.
Yeah, that picture does look like there's something up there. I don't know. So any thought to, I know this is silly, but any thought to putting the whitewash back because that was the original?
We haven't been able to determine exactly what the reason, if it was a whitewash. We think the reason it was removed fairly early in the project, it was probably a very strong maintenance issue with maintaining the whitewash. Very early pictures have it removed. And so at this point, we have no intention of putting it back because we believe that it may cause more harm than good. It's definitely something that we've thrown around as an idea. Oh, isn't this interesting? We had no idea it was designed this way. And looking back at some early photos, we found that it was changed very early in the process. It was not done the same way that North and South Market Square were designed. Their stucco elements were all clay tile backgrounds. It was a larger, true, full cement with a Portland wash on the outside. So looking at the elements here, the design is not quite the same in terms of depth.
Okay, and on the north side, are you going to replace that stoop to that door?
We are going to be doing some repairs.
Okay, because
on the sidewalk level. You can see the rust from the railing. I know site work and site amenities are something that are coming further down the path.
Okay.
And that area would be affected at that time. Right now, we're just focusing on the exterior skin.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a stoop on the north side.
Yes, there's a couple stoops on the west side as well.
Right. But on the north side, it seems like it's very uneven. Just wondering if that's kind of a hazard stepping out on that.
I'm sure we'll take a closer look and make sure that there's nothing that is hazardous. But the full replacement of it is something, as we're looking at hardscape for the whole Market Square campus, that area will be reviewed as well.
And then just to make sure, like in the alley where Amadei Market is, are you also replacing all those doors?
We are only replacing a few of the hollow metal doors that have just not stood up to time. The frames may be there, but the doors themselves may be replaced. So it's some of those areas we haven't been able to get in and out of yet because they're locked and the tenants are, Amadei is away for the winter. But the intent is to replace them if it's needed.
Okay, so they might stay metal.
They are going to be replaced as metal as well if we do it. It'll be hollow metal for hollow metal, but repair as opposed to, we have to look at the repair and decide what makes the most sense during that time. Is it better to just, it's hollow metal, so it may be easier to replace it with the clean hollow metal than to try to repair and repaint and then have rusting on the paint.
Okay.
Another question on that elevation, just curiosity. All the windows are bricked in.
Correct.
This building was built after the Marshall Fields building?
Correct.
Why did?
I'm not sure when the bricking in occurred. You can see it in some of the early drawings we found when we did historic research. There were some drawings from the 30s that already had a fair amount of them bricked in. Even a drawing I saw of Howard Van Doren Shaw showed openings with no windows in them, but just a masonry infill. It is that back alley, and it is also the on the gym. It's the area of the gym. Mm-hmm. So they might have felt that it was a hindrance to have any opening at that point, and they closed them up.
Okay.
So there's no intent on our part to change. As it is now, that's a corridor and some of the back of house of tenants. So there's not really an opportunity to open up the ground level, as well as Amadei has his display racks on that level. But they are there for, future use. The way they were infilled, they're easy enough to pull out.
Very curious.
Yeah, it was the back alley of the building, so I don't think there was any intent there were craft rooms and locker rooms in that back area. Okay. So they might have infilled them as they redesigned. We found evidence of a couple redesigns on the ground floor. One of those areas was a back craft room with a kiln, and it had a little door to it. So it was the south side of that alley had a little bit more openings than the north side. But intriguingly, the Howard Van Doren Shaw drawings that we found at the library showed a window opening, but it was filled with masonry on his original drawings. Okay. So the only thought did he design it because he thought it might be something they needed, and he put it in? It's a little strange, but
yeah.
Many architects do something to get ready for something else, and it never happens.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for either the staff or the petitioner? Now's an opportunity for any public testimony, if there is any. I see none, so I will say we can deliberate.
Okay.
Any deliberations?
I think it's important that we keep all the paint colors and the door styles on the front consistent. I think that's really critical. I think we said that a long time ago, right? And ditto to the awnings when you review that too. The alcoves for the sculptures, future sculptures should be white, which is good. And you're going to be replacing the stoop. What else? I think it's really good. Looks good.
Really good. Chicken heads. I'll ask for a motion.
I've prepared one if you wish.
I'd love it.
I'll try and go fast.
No, you don't have to.
Based on the findings detailed in the applicable staff report dated February 25, 2015, which document that the project complies with the standards in Chapter 51, Historic Preservation of the City Code, and incorporating the materials submitted and presented by the petitioner, and the testimony and the deliberations of the commission at this public meeting as additional findings, I move that the commission grant a certificate of appropriateness approving facade restoration and roof replacement for the North Gate building located at 675 Forest Avenue as part of Phase 2 of the restoration of Market Square, as detailed in the submission materials dated February 17, 2015, and in the presentation made by the petitioners at the February 25, 2015 meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, subject to conditions of approval enumerated under numbered paragraphs 1 and 2 on page 4 of the applicable staff report.
All right, thank you. The motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded by Commissioner Athenson. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So we are on to the next one. What's next?
All right, what we have next is our first kind of storefronts that we are presenting to you. One of the storefronts is on the existing Howard Van Doren Shaw property, located right here where Old Food and Wine was previously located, and one of our storefronts is in one of the 1890s buildings that is adjacent to the original Howard Van Doren Shaw project. What we'd like to do with these storefronts is, obviously, the storefronts that are across the facade are in different shapes of repair or originality. And these two areas are at the moment not leased and are getting ready to be leased. So we felt it was a good place to be able to dismantle some of the elements from behind, to understand what we had behind the plywood, and get a better understanding of what we could potentially do with the storefronts. And these were two perfect specimens because they're two different parts of the project, and we would like these to kind of be a model for what we would propose to do with storefronts as tenants turn over, because the storefront work is very difficult with the tenants to be knocking holes in their walls to see what might be behind it or in front of it. So these two work out perfectly in that manner. The first storefront I'd like to talk about is at the Old Food and Wine. What you saw in your packet was one of the original drawings from Howard Van Doren Shaw. It's hard to read, but these were metal transoms and these were wood transoms. Down below was a wood and glass prismatic feel that you see a lot in the drawings and is replicated in the bank next door. And also you see a few pieces of it in originality around North and South Market Square. The good news is when we took the plywood off from behind, lo and behold, the original metal transoms were still there.
Exciting.
We were very excited. Also, the original wood sash above the door was there as well, complete with mechanism and chain to hold the transom open. That gave us a good inclination, even though it's slightly different if you notice, this looks like a centered storefront. What was actually built was not. These are early kind of design drawings, so they're not the exact construction drawings, but enough that it matches up with what we found. Also, sometime along this storefront, maybe when the post office was removed, a granite base was installed below where the existing windows are, and it's in very bad disrepair. It's disjointing. There's a louver there you can just stick your hand right into. And when we opened up from behind, the masonry wall that was infilled in there is in poor shape. So what we are recommending in this space is to uncover the metal transoms and the prismatic glass that is still original, clean and repair in place. Hopefully when we take everything down, we won't find some broken glass, but we're not 100% sure. We're still in the middle of doing demolition from the inside. And then of course, we're gonna wait to do this work until we're approved and permitted to start pulling apart the front facade. What we have found here, I've got a couple images of, this is looking at the storefront up close. You'll see an original copper paning for the sill and a copper paning up at the top. The granite base is in here, and there's one of the holes that you can kind of investigate inside. What we've discovered is that there is a historic copper paning still in place, but at some point someone has put in an aluminum storefront and split the panes of glass. You will find an aluminum storefront here, as well as some sort of odd structural steel element to support the larger, deeper infill of plywood that they put up later. It was probably starting to sag. We are going to take that off, take off the steel support, remove the aluminum piece, and we propose to put a new aluminum storefront behind the existing historic panning elements that are still there, notch that into the side faces so that it's not past the profile of the copper and into the storefront, and put a matching in the piece that we have to have the new glass, because now glass has been split into two sides. We cannot get glass that will span this now. It would violate all the code requirements, and a fabricator wouldn't be able to manufacture it and support it and warranty it. We would put a matching copper historic panning across this piece as a cast element, so that from the outside it would read like the original historic intent, but it would be replacing the bad aluminum glass framing that has been installed over time. And that would be the same on both facades. Down below, we would do a metal and prismatic glass design mimicking what's done at the bank, as well as what you see here in the drawings. These are original cast iron columns that actually support the steel that is up above, and they're in very good shape. We would just be cleaning them, doing repair and repainting. They've already have a preliminary coat of paint on them, so the building did not look like it was going through a phase. So we quickly painted the storefronts down below to match the color scheme that we had painted up above. And a new door, since this is not the original door, a new wood door that would be matching the design intent of the original would be in place, a wooden glass door. This is not the original door that was installed with Howard Van Dornshaw. So this is what we would be doing at the food and wine storefront. Some historic images I felt were important here because we do not have any historic images of the 1890s building, but we do have images of Western Avenue. Our building would have been right down here, a little too fuzzy, but you may recognize these buildings. These are the buildings that are actually in Left Bank that have been turned and flipped when the Market Square property was built. So this is the edge of Market Square. Here's a nice close-up storefront to what an 1890s storefront would have been. It would have been large expanses of glass with transom above, which is where the signage would have occurred on a painted over the door. So the intent for this 1890s building, we have stripped all of the green paint off the limestone surround. In our first phase, we still have some patching and repair to do to the limestone. We're waiting for better weather. We were able to get the first coat off and have to go back again, but the weather turned frighteningly cold in November right as we got to that point, so it'll be back. What you can see here is the Einstein side. We're proposing right now this element. What you have here is some existing cast iron detailing that you see kind of hovering here. You see a little bit over here. We've ripped the backside off and found that indeed the cast iron elements do go all the way up to the ceiling, as we would have hoped to find in an 1890s. Unfortunately, none of the glass or framing is here in any way, shape, or form. It is just wood with plywood that is attached somehow by the grace of God to the existing storefront. There was also a new aluminum storefront system put in. That's why you see the mullion across here. Very similar to what was done at Food and Wine storefront. What we propose doing is pulling back and cleaning and exposing all of the historic cast iron detailing. There's actually an element here that's covered. This cast iron goes all the way up to this top, and the frames exist. Here is a nice close-up detail of what's going on. I think in your packet we have a little inlay. There's a cast iron column, and then there's screws that applied the cast iron detailing to the outside. What we also propose doing is there is a very modern brick infill that was put in this place. And what you can see in the Einsteins after we clean the paint off is the original limestone that would have matched the limestone surround. So we are presenting that this base would be the same limestone in color. Obviously it's newer limestone, but we'll try to get a good match with the same kind of pattern reveal to replace the newer masonry infill that does not match the era. Behind the existing cast iron, we'll put in a new aluminum storefront, very low profile, done in the same manner as Starbucks, tucked behind the existing cast iron, so that in essence from the facade, what you're seeing is the cast iron, but the element holding up the glazing to meet codes and warranties would be an actual aluminum frame. The missing element in between, we will do either a GFRC or a cast aluminum piece to mimic the other cast aluminum elements. We're proposing to do this only on this side of the bay, and in the future, depending on what happens with Einstein's or their work, we would try to replicate the work over here. But it's difficult to get access to, and we're not sure how much is intact. It may not match what's over here to what's over there. There was a renovation done at some point to try to match Market Square in design, and this building is not Market Square, nor should we try to replicate it. It's truly an 1890s, and what we're trying to do is restore that kind of 1890s feel. There's not very many of these buildings left around the property, so we think it's nice to make them sing. I also would like to point out, here's the beautiful copper bays that we discovered during our first renovation. And they look gorgeous and have a very interesting appeal. So that is our proposal for the storefronts.
All right, staff follow-up?
It's always hard to follow those presentations. From the staff perspective, we do see these two storefront renovations as really pilot projects. And I think going forward, rather than come to you with every storefront, I think we're going to very quickly see a pattern once these two are done, and perhaps we can put together a set of guidelines that will be followed for the various storefronts. But it's really exquisite work, and the amount of investigation and study that has gone in is really astounding. So again, I think the community is very, very lucky to have this kind of work and effort go into these buildings.
All right, so that was exactly what my question was going to be. So we are looking at two kind of examples of the storefront. The concept here would be to execute these, make sure the staff is comfortable and the petitioner understands what the general scope of the work is, and then either continue to come to us with more, or more hopefully develop a criteria that you would then apply going forward over a period of years when they come. All right, so that's the concept. Great.
Yeah, I had just a question on that, because so much of what you just went through is idiosyncratic in that it's related to the original structures. I'm just wondering how many elements do you think will be common template oriented that would be part of the guidelines, and can we call those out now to give you any guidance or to talk more about? Because I think there's a risk of just deferring the two pilot projects and assuming there's these guidelines that manifest themselves, but this seems like the campus and the storefronts is going to be so much idiosyncratic work that needs to happen to each individual structure that I'm just curious what common elements now you think would.
I think there's a fair amount of common elements with the Howard Van Doren Shaw. There's a common element to the upper transoms. that you will see in varying states. For example, at Forest Bouterie and the bakery, there is plywood over those. Those are originally transoms. We're not sure what is behind them, but I believe the intent in general is to try to restore a kind of transom detail. That would be a unique condition. I think the other unique piece of the puzzle is if there is Howard Van Doren Shaw historic elements, to try to preserve those and supplement them behind, because in general, when we've done a survey, the panning, some of the prismatic glass is original, some is not. In general, all the storefront glass, I think is, except maybe in one case, is not original. It's clearly got an aluminum frame that was put in after the fact. And there's still pieces of historic panning left, or in some cases, none at all. The intent would be the transoms are a very common element that occurred and are kind of integral, I think, to the original design and intent of Howard Van Doren Shaw. And in fact, Illinois Landmarks has an article about storefronts, a guide, and this building is actually discussed in terms of how he used the prismatic glass. And he kind of took convention aside by breaking up some of the facades with smaller pieces than what was normally done, what you see in the 1890s with the big wide open glass. So the other common element is how the basement level where there used to be windows may have been treated. Those in general are in all varying different shapes, but not very many of the original design intent is left there. And we have a fair amount of uncommon elements, and also those areas tend to be the areas in most disrepair because they're at grade and they were either not done correctly or maintained correctly. So those are two very common elements that I think going forward we would be looking at trying to hopefully find the original behind it or to kind of match that intent. In terms of the 1890s building, the other properties are very similar to this one in terms of cast iron storefronts with bases below. So I think they're very similar elements. The Griffith block and the unknown 1890s building are very similar in their design intent. So I feel that there's a lot of common characteristics of what we're doing here for what we'd be doing at the other storefronts. Some storefronts have hardly any of the original Howard Van Doren Shaw pieces left. They have design elements that are similar, but none of the original materials. So, but a majority of them have kind of the proportions there. It's the transoms and below that seem to have changed over time.
So let me ask you a question. It's a little bit different than what I heard Kathy say. If there is if there's a very similar section of a building that you would say, hey, we're doing exactly what was just approved on this section of the building, are you asking for approval tonight as a part of this approval to be able to have the staff administrate that if they see another storefront that is basically a duplication of this page 7? Or are we saying these are 2 test pilots, we're going to see how it goes and then come back to us? I'm just asking the question, not suggesting the answer.
From the staff perspective, I think that it would be appropriate to approve these 2 storefronts. I think that's how we wrote it up. And then assess them and then come back to you with kind of an overall approval.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
We're going to learn things as we repair them and restore them as well. So our intent, I think, is very clear, but I think it's appropriate to look back at what's done there and present to you what we feel the strategy going forward would be.
It's comforting because there's a lot of details here to understand. And for example, can the prismatic glass be matched at the base to the top? If you have broken ones, how, what do you do? And then the exact detailing around the storefront with the panning and what the aluminum is and how the profiles of that all work out. I'm sure there's much work left for you to do on that and
Correct.
For us to understand. So I think I applaud the technique of just let's take it a little bit slow on the front end, make sure we're happy with it, we can walk, touch it, look at it, and then go on from there. So that I think that's helpful actually.
Because every building might have a different issue too.
Well,
every
even
storefront, depending on the condition.
Even more so than that is just there's a lot of detail here that needs to be digested and understood. And on a set of 2-dimensional drawings, it's really hard to do that for both of us.
Yeah,
so
to see a lot of them.
I have sort of a broad question. Maybe you can explain your intent. as you proceed. You mention often, you know, that something wasn't the original door or something wasn't the original window. What if it was put in 20 years later, but right now we still think it's kind of cool and it's kind of good looking the way they did it 20 years later. And just because it wasn't original, I don't want you to think that you can just take it out.
Correct.
How would you go about something like that?
I think when we are replacing something that's not original, it's because it's in very bad shape. And the ability to try to restore or repair an element that's not original and is hard to understand the date of it in terms of its material. When something is definitely a Howard Van Doren Shaw piece, it's nice to try to preserve exactly how that was created and made. We can tell from the door that it was probably done in the renovation where the plywood was put up. So that's coming in an era that I'm not sure we want to replicate. And the material of the door itself is not of a quality that we think will last.
Okay,
so
I'm talking about any detail
any
in
detail.
the
So
entire
the
campus,
so
you
the
know, in the future.
So in the future, when we're looking at an element that is not original and what we need to do with it, it also is the state of disrepair that it may be in. If it's in not very good shape and it doesn't match the original and it should be replaced because it's end of life, the intent is to try to replace it with something that would match the architecture that it originally was intended to be.
I'm just concerned, and I don't need Market Square to look brand new, or, you know,
Correct.
fully, perfectly, you know, lovely in every, you know, square inch.
Especially if there's some cool stuff somewhere.
Exactly. Do you understand what
Correct.
I'm kind of getting at?
Correct. So the idea is to try to keep the cool stuff that that will not harm the
They're gonna be
building.
going, that's the OKW
That's
stuff.
the OKW. You know, part of it is a balancing act of trying to keep something, but having to replace or repair something that is causing damage because it can't be. It's 100 years old and it wasn't designed to last 100 years.
Agreed.
And so that is kind of our feeling.
It wasn't original, and it's okay. We don't really, you know.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask you about the door hardware?
Yes.
Because you mentioned door hardware, but we haven't seen an example of what you were intending.
The door hardware, it's hard to. We have some original hardware for inside the spaces, and there's some of the apartment doors still exist. I found them in our hunting, and they're quite gorgeous. The exterior hardware, looking around the property, there's lots of different hardware. When we renovated, we took the doors off to go up to the stairs. Those were taken back to a shop and completely stripped, epoxy repaired where needed, reglazed. We reinstalled the hardware that was on them because they were in good shape and they were attractive. The intent on the hardware here would be to replace it with something that would be similar of the era, that replicate what we think might be there based on other areas of the storefront. These two doors themselves, especially the one at where the frame form used to be, are just very run-of-the-mill kind of pieces of hardware. So the intent is to glean from the building and provide something that matches the style, but still is got the push-pull so that will function in terms of code and compliant access. We do not have an image of what that can be, and we will definitely have images to submit when we go in for permit on exactly what those elements are.
Yeah, because I noticed on the Einstein store too, they have like a really nice modern push bar on the outside, so that would not be.
Correct. The intent here is to do something that is reminiscent of the other hardware on the building from a historic standpoint, and we are always using, we feel, the Howard Van Doren Shaw basis of design because we feel that's the strongest element of design in the space, even though there's been other hands that touched it. So our touch point is to what would Howard Van Doren Shaw do and go from there and use the elements that we see on the building in different areas as our key point.
And can I ask you about those iron columns on that, what is that, 624?
Yes. Those are original cast iron columns, so they were cast. They support the steel lintel up above. You'll see them scattered throughout the property if you look. Some of them were painted green before, so they got lost. They are now painted what we believe is a true color that you would paint a cast iron, which is a charcoal.
So they're going to stay that color?
Correct.
Because they are so unique. It'd be nice
Correct.
to make them a little bit more.
So they're going to be
visible.
charcoal as opposed to the green and white that will be adjacent. And then I think you'll be able to stand out more. But they are scattered around the property. And in our repainting, we specifically went back and repainted those all cast iron to be the charcoal gray, the historic gray. And if you walk around now, you might notice more of them than you realized before.
I'm gonna look.
And they're actually structural cast iron columns holding the lintels up above. So they're,
Interesting.
same thing at the corner of the frame form Einstein. Behind that cast iron ribboning is a full cast iron column with a haunch holding up the structural lintel above.
So you see that from the inside?
When you're on the inside, you can see it when we pull down some of the plywood. You can see it as it goes up and the haunch. And that's how they were able to support the masonry that you see up above that's still spanning across.
So any interest in restoring that transom on the frame form building? On the top, those windows? You said you were going to leave it as plywood, or are you going to?
Oh, the Einstein side we're not touching. On the frame form side, yes, we're going to restore it with a full aluminum glass, and we can see the cast iron detailing is still up above there.
But isn't there supposed to be the transoms like in the other buildings?
Oh, the transoms in the 1890s were a full open glass, as you can see in this image. They were not small prismatic pieces. That was something of a later era, starting in the 1910s to 1930s. The prismatic glass was thought of a modern way when they invented steel. So those are steel frames with the prismatic glass to get a very thin look. One of the interesting things I learned from Anne and then on my own research was that the prismatic glass was a way to direct the light back farther deeper in the store. And this was before there was electricity. So it was a modern design to get more lighting to the back of the store. It started at about the era that Howard Van Doren Shore was working on it, and he kind of took that piece of it as well, but he also broke up his facade. For example, the bays right adjacent are very tiny bays and don't allow for a big view of merchandise. But the image we showed here was really helpful because this is what a true 1890s storefront would have been. The cast iron storefronts that you might see downtown that you've noticed, that's what the 1890s building on our property would have been. The thin cast iron columns to get as much glass as possible, and the transoms up above are just one large sheet of glass, and the signage would have been painted onto the window at this elevation.
Now, that would be really dramatic if you put that single.
So
pane
that
right
is
there.
our intent here, is that we have one large piece of glass surrounded by the cast iron detailing.
Okay, that's awesome.
We're just not touching the side of Einstein's that you see. Someone tried to make a market square-ish design instead of letting this building be its own building.
Yeah, because that's a different formula, it's a different building.
Correct.
Part
You
of
could-
the square, but it's not part of.
But it's not part of Howard Van Doren Shaw. It's an 1890s, and it should be treated as such, and the elements that make it a very interesting building should be, I think, emphasized and allow it to shine. And it also helps from a tenant standpoint as well. It gives you different individuality across that facade. And actually, that's one of the things Howard Van Doren Shaw spent a lot of time. If you notice, there's lots of quirky differences all the way across the building, and those are on the original designs. That was part of his whole piece of this, is to make it look like it was not done all at once, but might have organically grown with this image. So I think it's important that we keep that process going forward.
I did notice the prismatic glass was used in the base at Einstein's.
It's an older window. It's a newer kind of replacement right in this zone. It's not the original, and it would not have been prismatic glass when it.
Further north along Western.
Correct.
You have some of the
In the building next door, the Griffith block.
Right.
There might be, yes.
And some of it's been kicked in, so I mean,
Correct.
it's subject to.
Correct. And not all of these basements, this still has we're leaving this, the window stage platform with the basement below. So we're leaving this. This has been renovated already and removed.
So you would expect that if or when Einstein's went, then it would start to look like the other one? Would be the intent?
Yeah, I think our intent is when the new tenant comes in, the intent would be to match what we've just designed on the other side.
Are you repairing that iron vestibule.
We are looking at what we can do with this tread and how much of this, our hope is to leave it as is and do repair, but we have to kind of get back in there with the weather and do a little bit more. We have to clean it first, and we're not sure how much will remain, but the intent is to leave those steps as they exist now.
Another great detail.
Yes.
As I understand it, the approach for the frame form is the prototype for the 1890s.
It's similar. They're a little, the building next door, we actually have images from them from the era, because it was the Griffith block. So obviously it was important enough to get a name on the limestone, and therefore someone took some pictures, and they are available in the museum that we found. So we actually know what the original storefront for that building would have looked like.
So are you replacing that center door and also the light above it too?
We are just replacing this element at this point.
Okay, because that light is a modern, like, round thing, right? Above
Correct.
that.
And right now, there's a door to the upstairs that is staying as is for now, and we are focusing on this piece of the puzzle. So this door would be replaced to kind of match a more appropriate door. I think it's a more modern, it's a wood door, but it's got more modern kind of hardware to it, and it's not in the greatest shape.
Other questions?
Let's see.
Now's an opportunity for any public testimony, if there is any. And I see one testimony coming.
Hello, Linda Liang from 75 South Asbury Court. Again, I have a brief comment from the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, and it really relates to all three phases of the project. We applaud the owners of Market Square for all the work completed to date and for the restoration, repair, and enhancement work they are proposing. The new enhancements proposed for the North Court will enliven the space and make it more inviting to pedestrians. We're so grateful for your work and detail that you provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public testimony? All right, now we can deliberate if we have any deliberations. We can ask more questions too.
No, I think this sounds fabulous. This actually sounds like fun. So
All right,
thank you for all your work on that.
I will ask for a motion then.
I move that we grant a certificate of appropriateness to storefront repair and renovation at 672 and 724 Northwestern Avenue, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Preschlack. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. One more.
Good evening. My name is Mike Fitzgerald. Kathy, I agree. Eileen's presentations are tough to follow, both in their detail and interest. So I'll do my best on this part, or on these next couple parts. So up until now, we've been before you, and you've been reviewing what has predominantly been restoration and preservation, and have seen the deep research that our team has done, certainly with the guidance and great stewardship of our client, taking care of Market Square. We're going to start to move into a little bit of, as was just mentioned, enhancement, or part of the evolution of Market Square. It's certainly not new. Over the last 100 years, Market Square has evolved, both buildings as well as outdoor spaces. And so before you tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the transformation of that north court. I guess right now we don't want to call it court, it's a north service alley. And our intent is to transform that into a court, into that third public space, working in concert with the main square, as well as the South Court that was created back in the 1980s. And really expanding the Market Square experience even further north into this space north of the north building, and doing so hopefully with the intent in a very beautiful way, consistent with the beauty that we've all come and love of Market Square. I'm going to talk about three components And then there's a fourth, three components for consideration tonight for your review and hopeful approval. Then there's a fourth part that I want to talk about either after this presentation or kind of continuing, that talks about kind of further enhancement and evolution as an initial pass to throw some ideas out there and get feedback from you. So the first three pieces that I want to talk about, or that I'll talk about, are this new arcade, not new to what you've seen in Market Square, but new to this side, this north side, connecting the green to this north court, which is the second part, the creation of a garden, of a court, of a usable space now from what is right now a service alley. A third component is similar to what you've seen before, but now working on the back side of the building is a repair, restoration of an existing facade. And it'll take not the entire back portion of the north building, but probably about 60%, stopping there for now. And then after that, start to talk a little bit, introduce the idea of perhaps an addition back in this corner for an elevator and stair to gain access and accessibility to the second floor. So let me first talk about the proposed arcade connecting the square to the north court. Very similar to the south court arcade, the location of this entrance, this arcade, would be replacing the pair of doors and transom window. The existing stone surround remains, just like it does at that south court. So it's just the removal of that and creating this link, this open air link back to the court. It would be very similar to what you see and what was done in 1980 and what you see in the south court. But we do want to propose what we think are some improvements to that, both improvements from a maintenance durability standpoint, as well as what we think might be improvements as an aesthetic standpoint. And as one of your commissioners mentioned, we look to create new things that might hopefully are cool, that aren't necessarily hearkening back to what was done previously. And I think that this is a piece that we start with. Similar to what the south court is, it's a series of bays, piers and beams, detailed identically in the pier and the beam to what you see out there in the south court. There's a lot of detail. You see some of it in your railing here as well, stained wood. One of the departures that we start to do is looking at the infill between those beams, or between those columns, is that this infill would be wood trim, stained wood trim, and stucco, not just a plain stucco field with a display window kind of ham-handedly attached to that stucco. We still would propose some type of display window. We'll get into more detailed signage and awning things down the road in the coming months. But the idea is to have some type of element in the middle of that bay like you see in the south court, but trim these recessed areas out with wood, with stained wood to match in color and detail of the piers and the beams. Another slight departure, but important departure, is what all of this sits on and how it meets the ground. Currently, over at the south court, it's wood and stucco and quarry tile that's meeting the ground. The wood's not doing well as it meets the ground. And so we would propose a limestone base, just as the limestone piers of the north and south arcade touch the ground. We would want to make sure that there is a more durable material than wood and stucco and quarry tile touching the ground. So we have a limestone base on which this sits. Another component of this arcade is further level of detail. The photo in the middle is the detail of the main original Van Dorenshaw north and south arcades. They happen to be the only pieces that appear on both the north and south. They're the only symmetrical pieces in all of Market Square. And it's arcing wood bracket. And then the picture at the bottom is a detail of the south arcade that was added in the 80s. What we would propose is a bracket at each one of these piers, visually and supporting these beams, that is a little bit more in concert with the original brackets, where it's a concave surface, predominantly a concave surface, but still have a level of detail, and perhaps not jutting out in this convex piece so much as you see in that south court. Again, also playing off of what Van Dorenshaw was doing 100 years ago, where things that were happening on one side of Market Square are similar but not identical to things happening on the other side of Market Square, adding a little bit of interest and uniqueness as one works through the Market Square experience. We feel that this bracket is a piece that is both familiar but new and fresh. And the lighting as well, the lighting in the 3 bays of the arcade we would not propose to be identical to the pendants that are in the south arcade. And how they differ in a couple ways. And we researched to find the appropriate fixture. We're looking at the fixtures that are in both the original north and south arcades. They're a cage that have kind of a dome top. They're very transparent. They're delicate. But I think the dome top was key. We also looked in a lot of these things, we'll get into in more detail, we looked at Van Dorenshaw's contemporaries. Sir Edwin Lutyens, an English architect, doing country homes in England outside London. We know that Van Dorenshaw traveled to England, and it would not have been a surprise if the two of them met. They were architects that kind of shared a similar philosophy of looking to history for familiarity and comfort, but also looking forward as new and fresh ideas, not unlike the prismatic glass that we saw. This is a fixture that is kind of a more recent adaptation of a Lutyens fixture that was used. It has the dome top, consistent with what we see in the north and south arcade, and it's very open, and there's decoration and scrolling that you see throughout Market Square. So in these 3 bays, we would propose that lantern in lieu of the kind of chevron-shaped detail that you see in the south arcade. The second component, which is very much in concert with what we've brought before you, which is a repair, replace, tuck point, clean, repaint of the north facade, the alley facade of the north building. There are some unique pieces of this in that there are some infill components as well. Currently, there are stairs that go up to the second floor, apartments or office space. Above that, an open patio. What we propose is the infill of all of these individual stairs so that we can create a common corridor, provide better access up to and through the second floor. An infill between these iron brackets with a door and transom panel that would be in keeping with what we see throughout Market Square. And there's 3 locations of these. Where we may have a new infill emergency egress stair at the western end of this, in this area, that door may have glass in it, would have a light in it. If it's just a service space behind it, it may be solid, but it would be a paneled door with detail. You can see the existing flush hollow metal doors there without detail. We want to make sure we get some detail and some beauty to this side of the building. In addition to that door, existing service doors, we wouldn't necessarily replace, but we would add some detail to them. We would add a trim piece so that the level of detail is starting to be brought up to in a more appropriate level. That's what we would propose below the painted cast iron band that separates the first and second floor. Above that, we have the infills that some of them have a recessed slate cover over a mechanical shaft, and some of them are completely open. Our proposal is kind of two options in a way. One is if that space needs to be infilled because of a new egress stair, or there's a desire to infill it as expanding some indoor space a little bit, that these openings would be infilled with operable double hung windows consistent with the double hung windows you see on the front and also on the back of the building. They would be, I know we're going to be providing a mock-up of a replacement window for where windows do need to be replaced on the second floor, so we can look at the actual details. We've talked about it, but we still need to get a mock-up. And so that would be the replacement window in these infills. Same proportion, detail, mutton pattern for those areas. Or we leave it open and we don't touch it, and it remains open in its current condition. Another component of this facade is lighting, and we have kind of 3 sets of lighting. Currently there are these bent gooseneck fixtures that are kind of all over the place. We would propose a hierarchy of lighting. One is you see a decorative lamppost. The image above is our guide. It's the fixture that you see out in Market Square and throughout town. And this would be mounted in line with that cast iron element. And where it appears on the facade, and we'll get to in a minute, is directly across new proposed pedestrian-scaled street poles and lanterns. So that's, from a hierarchy standpoint, kind of really lamp 1 or lamp A, working with the whole arcade. Then there's another light that notches down the level of detail a little bit, that is above just these doors that are infilling those existing stairs. They still have a bell-shaped profile to them. And they appear in those 3 spots. And then a third type of lighting is very background. It appears where we need to have light by code at exit doors. It sits either above or adjacent to the door. The lamp is shielded, and it really truly is background. We don't want to draw any attention to that, because currently doors along the back alley side are haphazard. There is no rhyme or reason other than pure function of where they occur. And so we really kind of place those in the background. The third component that we're proposing is this renovation enhancement of the North Court. And the pieces that make up this court, one is the relocation of some of the services. There's a large pole here that provides electricity to the building. We're going to remove that pole, bury electrical work. Where we can remove and replace indoors, gas meters and piping and other service elements along the back, we will do that. We want to really clean up that facade as much as possible. Paving, the whole ground plane. The intent is that we have a combination of brick pavers that line the perimeter of the space with asphalt infills. We have walls that create enclosure to this space. Unlike South Courtyard, which really is an alley, it is bounded by 2-story high buildings on 3 sides, at the narrow sides as well as the end. This court takes on it's going to have a much different feel. 1, the scale is larger, and 2, what creates enclosure is much different. We have an edge that creates enclosure on these 2 sides, but the other 2 sides are currently quite open. There's an existing 8-foot high masonry kind of garden wall that encloses the Bank and Trust building's nicely landscaped courtyard, but the rest of this is all quite open. And so what we propose is the continuation of garden walls. And really what we're creating is kind of an English walled garden and creating another sense of enclosure, but doing it in a different way. We also propose a gateway off Bank Lane to this north court, similar to what you see in the south court, but a little bit different in detail. Lighting not only along the building, but along the more open edge where we have new masonry walls, and with light poles and lanterns similar to what you see in Market Square and around town. The pole that we propose, it would be a metal pole with fluted detailing, very similar to the town's original gas lanterns that sit atop a metal pole, but also kind of in concert or sympathetic to the precast concrete bell-shaped and tapered poles that you see out in Market Square. And these poles march along at about a 30-foot rhythm with the projecting or bracketed lanterns suspended from them. And keep in mind, opposite that is that same bracketed lantern on the building. So we start to create a rhythm and some formality or some order to this alley. And then the plantings that are along the perimeter of both the existing building and the new walls, in both low plantings and trees, that all add. All these materials add a level of scale and detail that we feel is consistent with the square and what's appropriate. So we start to look at the elevations of this north court. In the top left is this gateway that spans across kind of the alley or the throat or the threshold into the north court, calling out, another kind of threshold change from Bank Lane into what is predominantly pedestrian. The image on the upper right is a section through that first part with the existing building on your right and the garden wall on your left with the street poles in front. In the center is an elevation with your back to the Market Square building. You see the existing brick wall of the Bank and Trust garden, and then where there's an entrance into the bank's parking, we start to flank that with these new garden walls, as well as the line of wall that runs north-south, separating the court from the parking. Included in this garden wall of brick and limestone detailing and finials is some metal work. And it provides somewhat of a veil to see what's beyond, but still gives a sense of enclosure. And so the garden wall doesn't feel like a fortress. We want to be able to have one's eye move through the space.
Can you go back to that slide? In the bottom elevation, I'm just trying to orient myself around that. Can you describe that again?
This bottom elevation? Sure, where it's located is this line.
Yeah.
What we're proposing is breaking this wall of brick with a gate in the center. One of the things we want to do is we not only have connection from the square through the new arcade and connection through this gateway directly into the court, but there's a connection from the Bank and Trust property, both the parking lot and the garden. And so through this space, we have a gateway. So there's another connection. Again, trying to expand the Market Square experience, not just beyond the property that L3 owns, but throughout town, so that property line boundaries are not so defined visually, and so that we can connect through and to neighbors. And in elevation, that's the length of this wall, broken by that decorative metal gate, peeled away at the corners as it turns the corner so that your eye can move through the corner a little bit. so you don't feel perhaps too enclosed. And I think the image, which is a little dark on the screen, perhaps starts to give a truer sense of how that space feels. To orient us, we've got the back side, which is a beautiful facade of the Bank and Trust building, as kind of that farthest layer. But we have all these other layers in between, not only at the ground plane with combination of brick patterning and infills, but the masonry wall with the iron detailing at the corners or at the gate. Landscape, both low landscape adjacent to the wall, taller landscape that spans above the height of the wall, uplit with tree, uplit from below, and can really provide kind of a myriad of uses for this space day and night.
So that's looking south and north and west?
It's looking north-northwest.
Yeah.
The backside of what was really kind of phase one of the bank building.
Yeah.
And then when along Westminster, the bank expanded all the way to Western, the backside.
So behind the
of that.
wall is the parking lot, and then over to the left would be the...
Behind the wall is the parking lot, and off the screen to the left is the garden.
And right behind us is Market Square, what used to be the alleyway.
Right behind us, this is as if you just walked through the new arcade.
Yeah.
And came into the court.
Came into the new arcade, okay.
Standing right there.
I could, let me see.
Standing right there.
How thick are the walls, and was that a fair representation of their thickness and how they were going to be topped off?
So
in the last slide.
What
in
is
the
new arcade?
in this,
look at this one, because we're looking at a screen in front of us that has a different aspect ratio, so it makes the people look short, and it's a little different on the big screen. So variance, see how much different,
like my mirror,
different the foreground looks
Yeah.
here than there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like when you watch football on a really wide screen, you know. Bunch of
stretches it a
short
little
guys
bit
throwing
in
long
an
passes.
uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
Sir, I don't want to interrupt your narrative flow,
Oh, no,
but may I
please
ask you a
do.
question?
Absolutely.
Because when you say the new, so we have just walked through the new arcade and
Correct.
arrived at this point. So I'm super familiar with all of this because I worked there for many years. When you say the new arcade, I thought I had my arms around this, but what is the new arcade?
So
So the new arcade
between your shoe store and
is
your
this
store,
space.
going north.
You have forced bootery that is protected by the north arcade.
Right.
By the stone piers and wood brackets of the north arcade. Behind that's forced bootery.
Yes.
Jolly Good Fellows is in the sundial tower.
Gotcha.
Right here. And there's a door.
Yep. Can we go back to it?
There's a door right there.
Okay.
All right. So that door and that transom window get removed.
Okay, and then there's steps going up from there.
They would all be flush, though.
Oh, you're going to take out the steps?
Correct. It would all be flush, similar to the south
So you just walk
arcade.
through underneath.
I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Pardon me. And so you've walked through this, if it's 20 degrees outside, it's 20 degrees in that arcade, you're just covered now.
I didn't know that the other one wasn't Virgil.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So the gate on the, so that divides the north-south wall, as you get out of the arcade down there, right? Is that serviceable? Is it open up and then you go right into a parking spot that's in the?
95% of the time it's closed, but it would be operable so that there may be an event. It might be during like Forest Day festivities. It might be during the art fair, where Market Square and all of downtown really becomes dominated by pedestrians. And the art fair perhaps expands out of the square and into the flanking courts, or either with venues or either with artwork or other type of activities going on there.
Yeah.
Where from Westminster all the way to Deer Path and from Western to Forest to City Hall in a way could become very pedestrian. And so it provides the opportunity to open that up and make that connection with the bank's courtyard as well.
Okay.
Mind if I add? Can Mine's a question. This is mind-blowing.
One more mind-blowing
please do.
question from the.
So, I mean, I walked up and down those stairs thousands of times, literally, because I worked upstairs for
Okay.
years, a decade.
You're taking out his stairs.
Yeah, so you're taking out the stairs. I don't work there anymore. So, how are the guys going to get up to their offices?
That's the next part.
Oh, my
I'm
God.
sorry.
Stay tuned.
Behind the curtain.
The elevator.
Behind the curtain. We're making provisions, or we're proposing
They need to
provisions
do
for
it.
that.
They work up there.
Exactly, and rope ladders are not the answer. And so, even if it was a Van Dornshaw rope ladder, that's not the answer.
Original.
Original. So this last slide, just we've blown up some of the details. So you can see the details of the garden wall, of the gateway, of the iron fencing and gate. The detail of the archway, it's familiar with the archway that's at the south court, but it is detailed a little bit differently. We always found it odd that the wrought iron kind of went around this giant finial on top of the pier, as if the pier had the stone finial and the metal came after the fact. I don't even know if you recognize that, but we found that odd and quirky in an interesting way, and not one that we necessarily want to replicate. And so we're proposing a more standard brick pier, but has some detailing that is more in keeping with a more authentic traditional cap, as well as base. And then the iron, the metal archway that spans over to the other pier is of similar detail, but picks up some of the circular elements that you see in other details around Market Square. Still has this graceful scrolling. Is separated from not only the existing Bank and Trust garden wall, but it's also separated from the northwest corner of the building, these piers, and then between the pier and the building, or between the pier and the wall, is a graceful metal detail, so that the pier can stand away and not kind of be touching or uncomfortably nestled up against the Van Dornshaw building. We talked about kind of how the corners of that garden wall it's an L-shaped space. They open up a little bit, and so we can kind of see through these walls a little bit, but they still veil, what's parking behind it, and landscape. These islands behind this would be landscape, but there's a sense of something's beyond, and it's not just what's on the other side of the wall, as well as the gate. There's a lot of detail and decoration that's consistent with the square and the type of architecture, which for 95% of the time is closed and provides a nice backdrop. But again, you can see through it, and it provides openings when that becomes a great benefit to activating and enhancing this whole square.
Okay.
Our Colleen Phillips with Mariani Landscape is here to answer more specific questions about the landscape. But as I mentioned, there's a variety of landscape in both scale and texture and color and lighting around the perimeter. We also include the idea of pots that could be moved around on the square depending upon how the court is used, and providing perhaps seasonal color in the space. One thing I didn't mention so much, in this back, in this kind of northeast portion, would be a great opportunity for outdoor seating underneath a canopy of trees as well. So you have an open space. You can imagine a little quartet back there playing, and people in lawn chairs basically seated there, or there's a cocktail reception, or there's a very active event going on in this space, or there's a yoga event going on in this space. So we have a very open space, and then a kind of a more contemplative sit down, change the scale. In this corner, the alley portion would be very similar to the alley that's at the South Court. It's more of a passage through, but perhaps some of these stores as they evolve over time, and perhaps they too want storefront opening up out onto this, not unlike the South Court, it provides for opportunities like that.
But there's no plans to do that initially,
Correct. There's no plans to do that initially.
just based on the tenants and the configuration? And
Correct. But, and below that horizontal cast iron lintel is where all that can happen. But right now, until, that would be before you at another time when
Yeah,
things.
so you're building pathways to it, but, I mean, ostensibly, you could be diverting traffic to it. On special events, it'll be populated. But for the most part, and I can speak for myself, I park there all the time, and, you know, I'm going to the train, go to a quick Starbucks, you know, there's people that are smoking around there from the bank, you know, and so it is interesting, because, you know, there's people just parked in the back. It's a very, you know, there's a huge need, so I get
Sure.
it. It's just interesting that you'll be diverting traffic flow there, and then, you know, there'll still be cars being able to access through it. There'll be work done based on stocking and other things. So, this isn't a safety commission at all, but it is just interesting that this is going to be used a lot more in the summer and the spring. And, you know, just curious if...
Correct. It's probably a more European court than the South Court, in that what one often sees in a European court is it's a common public space that's used by pedestrians as well as vehicles. And vehicles travel at a very slow speed, obviously. Both the paving, the scale of elements, tightening up the space a little bit. So the few times cars are traveling through here, they can. They're gonna travel at a rate that's very respectful of the environment in which they're in. Much different than Bake Lane, much different than Westminster. An American version of that at a much different scale is out in Seattle at Pike's Place Market, where you have service vehicles and pedestrians, again, at a much different scale. A lot of vehicles and a lot of pedestrians. But this is a shared, there's a portion of this which is a shared environment.
So we have lots more feedback and chomping of bits. Do you have more to talk to about? I know that you have one other agenda item that's kind of related to this. I feel like it might be worth just giving us the
quick on that
so that people understand kind of the big picture.
I'll give you the quick on that.
Thanks. Yes.
Got it.
And I assume this is one that's not for approval tonight, but
Correct.
for understanding.
It's for understanding and your thoughts.
And feedback, great. That's good.
The stair and elevator. We looked at trying to provide access, accessibility to the second floor of the North Market Square building, and looked at a number of places to locate this vertical transportation. For a myriad of reasons, we feel that kind of behind Jolly Good Fellows in this recess portion is the ideal spot. It's accessed by this, you know, proposed arcade off of the square. It's centrally located, and it can serve not only the second floor of the building, but it can also serve in a manner the courtyard itself. Flipping the orientation, what is comprised in here? It's still in the planning, but the idea of it's a stair, it's an elevator with a little lobby, and perhaps even a public restroom. There are no public restrooms in the square. You got to go into a shop. So here's an opportunity to provide a public restroom in the court. And we're bantering around a couple ideas. We've got one that's more of a background idea and one that's a little bit more figural. The background idea is it's a masonry enclosure with punched windows, much like what you see typically along the back. These windows look into perhaps a lobby at where the elevator is. This opening and window above, this maintains access to the back of this tenant And off that, what is kind of like a mini arcade, is the public restroom. And another solution perhaps is a little bit more figural. It's more transparent. Same components of stair, elevator, lobby, and restroom, but it's predominantly of wood-clad or metal-clad post and beam and glass, picking up some of the same detailing you see in the storefront, with prismatic glass at the floor lines. It's capped with a slate pyramid roof and creates a little bit of a different background, almost balancing act to that North Market Square, keeping in mind at the north end of the court is the double gabled element of the bank building. And so at the south end of this court, that's at the north end of the court. So at the south end of the court would be this element, and then of course the sundial tower in the background.
That's cool.
The extent of the expansion, this line in plan is the existing back wall. This is the depth of that indentation. So the stair and the water closet would occupy that space, and the elevator would project out a little bit further there. This is the arcade, and we would continue a flat roofed element so that you would have complete coverage before getting into that lobby.
So,
Wow.
before we ask questions, any follow-up from you?
Yes, I'm going to try and boil this down. There was a lot to cover tonight, and we talked a lot about how to give this to you in manageable pieces. So I think the two certificates of appropriateness that you already approved, those were good to get those off the table. I think the items before you tonight for action as part of this last certificate of appropriateness are really four elements. One is the creation of the pedestrian arcade. That will involve some removal of materials, minimal removal of materials, but to be sure we've covered all the bases, we did address the demolition criteria in your staff report. As conditions of approval for that piece, we would suggest that a condition require that existing conditions be documented, and we would provide those, we would retain those not only in the city archives, but also provide those to the Historical Society. The second piece has to do with the restoration repair of the north elevation of Market Square in that area. And that was described, so I won't go into it. The third piece has to do with the infilling of the stairways and the balconies. You were provided with a couple options for the balconies. Initially, in reviewing that, staff did have some concerns. The stairways and the balconies in the south alley are really quite charming. But as was described by Mr. Fitzgerald, that really is a different relationship. You do have a very narrow span, buildings on both sides, so you really get to experience those stairways, the planters that hang from some of the balconies. And from a realistic perspective, the opportunity to really enhance second floor space in this portion of Market Square is really an important component of the overall work. So obviously taking out the stairs that Commissioner Travers used so many times necessitates providing other access to the second floor. So on balance, infilling those spaces, providing the option for either infilling those with glass, which would keep those, retain an appearance of void, or keep them open, seems to be a reasonable approach, and is really consistent with the effort to really enhance the overall viability of Market Square. The fourth element before you for approval as part of this last certificate of appropriateness is the overall enhancement of that alley. And that does include landscaping, which I think the fact that there isn't a whole lot of room for landscaping, I'm confident that our city arborist can work closely with Mariani and assure that they're the appropriate species and the right mix of colors and appropriate plants to tolerate plowing or salt or whatever they need to tolerate. The walls are a piece of this, the garden walls proposed. The ironwork, the archway at the Bank Lane entrance does seem to be appropriate and does relate to the archway over the south entrance. I think from the staff perspective, as part of final plans, we want to see some more detail on the ironwork proposed in the wall that runs north-south. Make sure that relates, those elements, the form of that ironwork relates to Market Square, isn't too ornate. So I think we'd want to see more refinement on that. Some of that is detailed in the conditions. We would also be looking for a final lighting plan, just to make sure we understand the lighting, to make sure we really balance bringing light and energy to this area, but really respecting the dark sky, the overall subtle lighting that this community really cherishes. So those aspects of the plan we feel are ready to move forward. You do have findings and support. Subject to conditions, I think we do have a high level of confidence in the coordination and communication that has occurred to date. The final piece, the elevator is presented and the stair tower presented for your input tonight. Again, this is an important piece in making that second floor viable, in making the creation of the pedestrian arcade viable, and really looking to you. The location as proposed does seem to be appropriate. There were some earlier thoughts about having it located closer to Bank Lane. This really locates that element in an area that will assure that it isn't visible at all from within Market Square, and that from the alleyway it is appropriately designed. It also would have minimal, if any, visibility from perhaps Bank Lane and really not at all from Western or Westminster. So looking for your input on that piece, but do ask you to consider a certificate of appropriateness for the other elements. I hope that helped and didn't confuse the issue more.
Perfect. So now's an opportunity to ask questions. Kathy, I'll start it off with just not so much of an aesthetic question, but practical. The property that this is this all L3's property that we're talking about? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And is there a setback that is less than this, or is this building on the setback line, or?
In the B4 zoning district, there is no setback.
Setback. So in the event that sometime in the future, one shop or another wanted to extend into this alley a little bit bump or something, that could be considered?
That alley does need to remain passable because of the adjacent Lake Forest Bank parking lot.
And that is an easement through it, or?
That is an easement through that. So extending into that alley, I think, would be problematic.
Precluded at least going west from the Lake Forest access.
Correct.
Okay.
Going west from the entrance to that parking lot. On the other hand, although projecting into the alley would be an issue, opening up some of the backs of those spaces. Much has happened when Bank of America was constructed. One of the requirements was that they construct a pedestrian walkway from the Corda lot, which is on the west side of Bank Lane, near the Lake Forest Bank and Trust drive-through. That walkway was constructed as part of the Bank of America, and that now extends all the way through Western Avenue. And several of those spaces then opened up visibility to that walkway. So what this does is really create an opportunity for the future. It provides a way to invite special events into this area.
Now you're selling, not answering the question. You don't really need to sell that.
Okay,
all right, so just practical question. So garbage on the other side is wheeled down, or does a garbage truck go underneath that gate and drive to, how does garbage handled?
We are actually working together to coordinate on relocating garbage, perhaps in a central area in the city parking lots
Okay.
that could service Market Square, but other businesses, so that we're taking that service operation out of that area.
I got it. So the idea here would be that you don't need to make a provision or allow provision for a garbage truck to be able to get underneath that wrought iron gate, and garbage wouldn't be sitting out here.
Correct.
Right, okay, great.
Kathy, has the staff taken a look at just the structural integrity of the building, and just from an engineering perspective, just kind of gauge feasibility for the personal arcade, and there's no support beams or structural issues?
We haven't done that, but L3 has a very good team, and we certainly would require detailed plans before permits were issued for that. So I'm confident that all that would be covered.
And the plan would be to do that, to do the 3 components and implement them, and then wait on the elevator and the rear access? Or would you want to bundle the personal arcade and the rear access together in terms of implementation?
Yeah, that makes most sense. You need to
I didn't
understand.
hear you,
the-
I'm sorry.
I think you-
Approval this year and next year do the elevator.
So they obviously can't execute all of this necessarily without knowing what the how you get up and down. But if I'm hearing that right, you need to move along this far to know what you've got to work with, and then you would figure out how to get up and down.
Sure, there's an entrance on Western Avenue that would minimally
Yeah,
allow
you
to
can
up
get
and
into
down.
those structures, it's just a little less
Sure,
convenient.
go on. It'd be great.
Just to kind of speak on the arcade, if we take the stairs up going over, there's still a connection on the second floor back to another stair. So in the short term, people can still get to that office space from the stair that is located right in here in Jolly Good Fellows, and that we would link. They're actually connected now by secret doors that you can get from this hallway over to here if you have the key. So we would be opening up on the upper floor, waiting for as a stair access only, for the elevator stair component to come in later. So we could do it in phases. But the whole piece and puzzle to the reason why we want to do this is related to having this stair and elevator where we're going to locate it. So as we're designing all the elements, they can integrate together appropriately. Whether construction wants to start now to open up the courtyard, but the construction of the stair and elevator may have to, because of seasonal issues and timing, would be potentially happening next year. But we want to understand that where we're locating it in general, kind of footprint is appropriate, and work on the exterior design elements and get approval on that this year so that we can understand our construction strategies for phasing.
Other questions for petitioner or staff?
I have a question.
I figured there would be one.
I have a question. What kind of vehicles are you visualizing driving into this courtyard then?
Well, anybody that goes into the parking lot at the bank has the right to access through it. They have an easement, right?
Just in this area.
Yeah.
So what you just.
So the
you're
type
just
of
talking about
vehicles-
cars that are going to the parking lot?
The type of vehicles that are using the parking lot that are going beneath this archway on Westminster.
Okay.
That perhaps they're coming from Market Square and they want to come down Bank Lane and kind of sneak in this way without having to go all the way around.
There
the
aren't going to
corner.
be any trucks delivering material to the stores, or?
Historically.
We are removing the ability to park back there, except for special permission, similar to the other alley now, where every so often folks will use it with their vehicle, unload early in the morning before store hours. Beyond Lake Forest Bank and that entrance and that easement, there will be no more vehicles to the east. However, we have to provide, obviously, because of the easement, the ability for cars, SUVs, and people to go through Lake Forest Bank and Trust. So to answer your question, will service vehicles be allowed to go all the way back to the east? Yes, special permission, certain times, but it will no longer be a service alley.
So those trucks or whatever would turn and go through the Lake Forest Bank lot to leave.
Well, in fact, on the north side, you're limited in headroom already by the bank structure. So between the new gate on the west and the bank structure on the east, effectively, small vehicles only can make it through there.
But I mean, they would
Store
exit.
deliveries aren't going to be made from that alleyway anymore?
I'll say it a little differently. It's built, obviously the hardscape is built so that a vehicle can go all the way to the back. But if you look at South Market Square, those folks load from the front of their spaces, not the rear. Here, we'll encourage that. We will likely have signage, we'll send memos, we'll ask them not to do it. But certainly if Gerhardt's calls us and asks for a special request because they have a, 30-foot box truck, then we'll try to find a way to accommodate, so.
Yeah, it's going to be frowned upon, but it'll be a change over a period of time.
So they will leave, you anticipate them then leaving through the Lake Forest Bank lot and going north? Is that how they get out?
You could leave by coming back to Bank Lane or through the lot, either way.
So if they come back to Bank Lane, though, they're going to back out then?
That'd be, if they've come in forward, yes, yeah.
So don't you have apartments up there too? Don't.
We do have apartments, and we are accommodating them with permitted parking off-site likely. So yes, we do.
I guess a question on the elevator or the stairwell tower or the north elevation of the stage 4. Concerns, last question, I guess, is that competes. It's hard to understand the depth of that. So I'm just curious, how many feet would be off the existing facade, and then, how you thought about heighting it and, kind of shaping it, just so it doesn't compete with the tower. The
Sure.
tower is such an iconic landmark and figure to the town and obviously to your property. I mean, you own it. I don't need to tell you anything that you need to preserve here. But I'm just curious how, there's a lot of windows. It's a decent size height. It's kind of like a little mini-me to the tower. And I'm just curious how you thought about it. And I know it's not fully baked and all that.
Sure. Well, we thought about it in a couple ways. We thought about it really in a couple ways. First, just looking at the plan to answer that. If we look at this plan, this is the indentation. So towards the top of the screen is heading back towards the main square. It would be south. The back of Jolly Good Fellows is this wall. And then the depth of the tenants to the west expand about another 8-9 feet. And this would be the length of the alley wall.
Okay.
So the stair and the toilet room and kind of the entrance, it's virtually aligning with that back wall.
And in the existing footprint.
Correct.
So what's the feet off of, for the new structure or the addition to the existing footprint? So what's the dimension?
Well, this is about 8 or 9 feet, and that's another 8 or 9 feet. So let's say it's 18 at its maximum. It's 18 feet out. With 9 feet of it sticking out beyond the extent of the existing wall. And the width is the entire width of the back of Jolly Good Fellows, which is about 30 feet, something like that.
But it's drawn,
Can you go to the?
it's drawn in the site plan.
You can kind of, if you look at this plan, so what you see in the darker shade is the addition. The existing back wall is along here, and then it sets back a little bit before you get to this, and then there's a lot of stepping going on here.
And so, can you go to the elevation that shows the new north elevation that shows the 4 panes, the double-decker facade? Yeah, that
This one, sure.
Yeah.
So to answer your second question, kind of what were we thinking of in the design of this? We wanted to look at it in a couple ways. One is look at it as purely background, and clad that structure in brick. There's a lot of different brick back here, so we would look at what's the appropriate masonry to use back there. Is it kind of Chicago common brick, which is what this is predominantly, or do we use more of a face brick like you see on the front of the building, and perhaps give it a little bit of a pattern, like a Flemish bond to it, almost like City Hall has, where you've got a little bit of accents. So it doesn't look perhaps too utilitarian, because it is a new piece, and the hope, whether it's still background or more foreground, it's a cool looking piece back there, because most importantly, it needs to be inviting. You need to feel safe going to it, and when you're in it, one wants to feel safe in it. And so we want to make sure that there's plenty of visibility into it, as well as from within visibility out, not only from a safety standpoint, but also from enjoying the enhancement of the North Court. As you're waiting in the lobby, on the first or second floor, you're looking north into that new landscape North Court. So in this scenario, though, we were looking at it as more background from its cladding. In this scenario, the portion that housed the elevator and the lobby becomes more figural. It's much more transparent. It's like it's an English great room that juts out into a garden, and becomes perhaps a balance at the south end of this court to what you see at the north end of the court, which is actually beyond the wall, which is the back side of the bank building, these pair of gables. And what we know is important is that we need to look at this three-dimensionally. We need to look at modeling this in the computer with the existing Market Square and the tower, and getting three-dimensional views of this back corner, just as we have that three-dimensional view looking north. We need to get three-dimensional views looking south from a massing standpoint.
Yeah. So if you'll humor me all for a second, the hour's getting later. I'm going to advance the discussion so that we're beyond the question period. I'm going to ask if there's any public testimony.
Oh, wait a minute.
I see
I'm not even
none.
done.
I know, and then I'm going to open it up for deliberations, and we can continue asking questions. But I think it's important. We're getting to a point in the conversation where you can't stand but opine as you ask a question. So we have some opinions. We have, I think some ideas, and I think as we ask questions, I think folks would like to also give you some opinions. So now we're in the deliberation section. So ask questions and deliberate as you will.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean
Please.
to panic.
No. It wasn't removing your opportunity.
Do public comment first?
Is there public testimony?
She's done.
There's no public, so.
Okay. Yeah, well, she
Put the phone in.
That's got good.
Well, thanks for.
Everybody left, so.
Thanks for that
so
semantic
now we've-
transition.
So
then,
now we've transitioned into, we
Yeah.
can do whatever we want, but ask questions and deliberate as you will.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about the character of the back of this Northgate building, because you do have a precedent in the Southgate building, or not Southgate, South Court.
South Court, yes.
South Court. So when you walk through South Court, I think it's a smaller space, but I think what makes that so inviting is you've kept the residential character back there. You've got the balconies with the flower boxes, you've got the stairways, and it makes it much more comfortable and provides some kind of architectural detail.
See how this is less of a question than more of a
I know.
deliberation?
Well, you
That's
gave me
right.
permission, so I'm doing it.
I was asking a question.
So if you go on the flip side now, you're looking at a bigger space, but it's very utilitarian now, right? You've got the gray industrial look, you've got flat walls, and if you start filling in those spaces that are the residential character of the back, it's just going to be utilitarian, a bunch of doors, and not very inviting. You don't really have a lot of space for landscaping, whereas at the South Court, you had a lot more space for landscaping. So my concern is if you start infilling all that, you're just going to have a solid wall with no character and just a bunch of doors, and really not minimal space for landscaping. It's not going to be inviting like you think it's going to be. So I would really strongly encourage you to keep the stairs open and also the balconies open to provide some kind of, and keep that residential character that this was originally was. This was the original character. These are original features on the building. They're the historic features. And I think you really should consider keeping those to provide some kind of flavor of the residents that used to be there. And it would be much more inviting that way. You know, if you look at your renderings with the doors all closed, it's just a bunch of doors. and they're closed and there's no glass on them, it's not going to be an inviting space for pedestrians. It's not going to draw you into there. You might come through the arcade part because that's kind of, ooh, what's behind there, and it's inviting. But I think going down the Bank Lane, it's still going to look like a delivery center, or like a garbage area. So that was my biggest concern with that north gate. I think the whole idea of the transparent tower is a great idea because you also provide some architectural, differences. And it also kind of symbolizes that this is a new addition. You're not trying to mask it as an original part of the building with the elevator tower. But I really think you need to go back and look at keeping those openings. And I think that's really going to make a big difference in the character of that area.
Questions?
I was just I wanted to just confirm on the tower and the elevator. There was 3 alternatives. Two. So there was the tower with the glass, and then there was another page here that I guess
This one.
It's called new infill. At least in our package, there seems to be 3. And you're still setting on
You're
that
correct.
design.
We eliminated one of the ones from your package.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know that even that one's in this package. Those are like a 4th, but.
You're probably right.
But.
Last page. Oh.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at. So that's not represented in
Oh, I
this.
see, yeah, we don't have the plan.
So they're different.
You're correct.
But, so I guess.
We're still working on it.
I guess, which is great. And I think for us, I'm just trying to galvanize us around, maybe we'll give you feedback on that component and aesthetic. And then I think Commissioner Athenson gave you some good feedback on that. I would just posit that they're different spaces. I know there's maybe some parallelism between the physical location of them, but I mean, this is a totally different vibe than the South Court. There's the alleyway and the service nature of it that brings up some other issues, but I'm not so concerned that it needs to retain the residential element because it's just underutilized space. It's next to the bank. It's next to a wall. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be a bookend to the south, but it needs to be well thought out. And I think that at least the north elevation that we have in our packet on page 19, there's lots of detail, there's lots of different windows and doors, and albeit, it's closed, but it's not just a sheer massing that looks abhorrent and strange, and now it's two-dimensional, so it's hard to maybe see how it plays out. So I'm actually not so concerned with the kind of north component that's just west of the tower, as I am just getting the design right on the tower. Because I think the serviceability, and I don't know about energy consumption or, other issues, but those stairwells, the porches, I mean, to me, they don't have a great aesthetic, but I think there's also some usability issues that maybe you were considering for the building in terms of its energy efficiency and
There's a
safety.
possibility
I
with
mean,
that.
I don't know, but
They currently are not code compliant. They're very steep.
yeah,
And decrepit.
yeah.
Like
So
this
decrepit.
Arrow.
Yeah. So I mean, I think to Mary Ellen's point, preserving and matching and all the other things versus it's an organism, it's living and breathing. This is something that needs to be balanced, given that this is an opportunity to reinvent this space a little bit, and so those are just some thoughts I have.
I'll throw a couple out. I love this. I think this is a great opportunity for the city and for this block. It's really underutilized space, so I think you're really on the right track here to do something really cool. With respect to the access, I'd encourage you to look at whether that doorway really wants to be opening into the arcade or whether it wants to open to the north, or maybe it wants to be on the corner and open both directions, or maybe in all 3 directions. Maybe you put the elevator inward and you let that stairway be more prominent somehow, or that entrance be more prominent. At the same time, I think there's a compromise between the kind of very demure go-away solution where it all blends in and the in your face glass wall reminds me a little bit of the addition on the high school where it's like this, you know, it was never my
Screaming,
favorite, frankly.
Not
So I do think you want to be really careful to not compete with the tower, but I think you can do that. You can execute it with a similar roof material or roof line as you've got on the rest of the back. There's a way to do that where you get a little more punch than the one that's on the screen, but it doesn't have to be quite as in your face as the other one. And I think it would be nice to have that look at that courtyard that you're creating. I think, well, I'm not sure I agree that you need to keep the stairs and the open porches. I do agree with the concept that when you walk through the south court, there's some stuff going on. And surprisingly in plan, there's much less going on than I think about. You know, when I picture myself walking through that court, I think there's a lot of stuff going on. There's ins and outs and stuff. There's really not that much. There's a stairway, there's a couple things. So it may, and I was thinking about that when I asked the question about the setback or the easement, because it may be that if you could create a little bit of you know, break the rhythm of that wall up somehow a little bit. It's a pretty severe wall, and particularly if you fill in those openings and those stairs, it becomes a blank wall. And so I think my comment would be is if you can find a way to get yourself some relief, you know, some massing relief along that wall. Maybe it's in landscaping, maybe it's in, you know, artifacts, I don't know, maybe it's in the 2-foot jog in the building, I don't know the answer, but it seems like if there's a way to break it up, or perhaps it can happen on the other side of it, you know, picture a couple of really big trees and the landscape islands that happen to be on the bank's property. That kind of, you know, planted structure can help also reduce that severity of that wall. But, you know, these are kind of, in my mind, these are kind of tweaks that you'll find as you get through it, and some of them will be found opportunities, and some of them will be. I mean, I think it's a really promising project, and I would like to see you keep working on it myself. So that's kind of my.
You know, the other
thoughts.
thing I wanted to ask you about too was the back of the Western Avenue buildings,
Mhm.
because when you get into that courtyard, the backs of the second floor really are distracting. You know, I mean, are you planning on doing any changes to the back of the? Because if you're in that beautiful space and you've got all this landscaping, and then you look
Not
at
in,
this
not in
crazy-
this phase, but that'll be brought
Yeah.
before you at another phase. As you know, this whole process has been a series of phases, and the intent is to address that.
Would you keep the gray paint, or would you paint all that green?
Well, actually, looking at it even beyond that, we want to make sure that we're using the historic colors of the building on the front, on the back as well. So typically, as you see, metalwork iron is dark; it's that charcoal.
Right.
So even that cast iron lintel
Yeah.
that is gray and chipping would be dark. So some of these elements start to pop, and it does kind of invigorate that facade. The windows would be green with the ivory or white color. Perhaps as a kind of a stopgap measure right now, the back side of the Western Avenue buildings would get painted. If a lot of effort is going into 60% of the back side, our client wants to address that in some way before looking at that more holistically down the road.
And I'm just mentioning it because it was such a distraction.
Do you guys, I mean, do you think it'd be helpful to break up number 3 into like 3 components? I mean, I kind of feel like there's 3 A, B, and C, and A is the pedestrian arcade, and then the hardtack courtyard, and, you know, just that layout and the design features around the gates and the walls and all those things. And then, you know, we just say, okay, let's talk about that. Because I'm hearing, you know, 2 concerns around the massing of the north, you know, backdrop. And then there's some tower stuff that you're still working through. So I don't know if that's B and C, or that could just be B. But it seems like 3A is you know, in our packets, it's you know, it's basically the bulk of this, but it's
Well, I mean,
13, 14,
If
you know.
to say it easier, you know, everything we see, I think we like, but we have some reservations about filling in the balconies, because we don't really understand how the quid pro quo on that, whether that really is required or not, and how the all massing works. And then, of course, this stair, you're not asking us for approval, you got some feedback from us, which I think is great. So perhaps you would be amenable to pulling the balcony portion of the, or we could condition our approval with saying that we don't approve that for now. Is that? just
Yeah, in
pull it?
terms of the balcony stair infill, that is not as critical as the courtyard and the arcade.
And I would say it's not off the table, but it's just something we're not ready to
Correct.
approve today, you know, it's.
And I think we can bring you some drawings to show you how we plan on doing it. The windows we're going to set back, so you still have that very large sill, so that still looks like a balcony overhanging. And the thought is you'd still put the same planters that we have on South Market Square, so that element still feels like a window box seat. They wouldn't be flush on the facade. And with the stairs, the idea is to kind of create some design element, because right now it's just kind of this dark recess. And then the hope is to get the movement in the facade is with the storefronts. One of the things I noticed in South Market Square, most of you probably don't notice, but there is a stair over by Food and Wine that you don't even notice is there because there's a massive glass with doors. And one of the things in South Market Square that I think works really well is there's a lot of storefront on the backside. That's visually what you're seeing, and then you have the planters themselves. The stair, whether the stair is there or not, is a black void. Sometimes you don't notice that it's there. So I think tabling that and giving you more information on how we're going to address it, I think we can show you how we're hoping to address it. So there's still some ins and outs in the facade, and the hope is to get your in and out concern is as tenants are able to adjust, having a back entry and back storefront. As you can see from the original design, the lintels go all the way across. The new infill of masonry that used to have a large opening in the original design. And in South Market Square, Vinci put in the new storefronts. Those were lost, just like these alleys were, and brought back. So the intent is for, if you build it, they will come. If you build the courtyard and the entrance to the stair and people start coming, the tenants will want to renovate, or new tenants come in and access that back alley.
I just feel like this is, it's an industrial area. And I feel like, you know, with the exposed pipes and, you know, there are a lot of ugly elements that make it just sort of a city, sort of a New York, Soho, industrial space. And I think if you sort of, you know, pretty it up with the lantern look, I think that might be a mistake. You showed us before a hierarchy of lighting that had sort of a gooseneck, sort of a metal lantern. It's not in my packet. But I wonder if the center, I wonder if that wouldn't be a better option. Just sort of, let's just look at it for what it is. You know, it's sort of an ugly alley. So let's just keep it as sort of our urban space in Lake Forest.
But I think the
treat it as
concept
such.
is to transform it.
I don't, I mean,
Well, do you think of the?
Are you trying to
do you think of the
transform it?
South Court as an
I feel
ugly
like
alley?
there's so many elements that are kind of immovable and permanent.
Well, this is why I brought up character,
make
because
it-
I think you
that
need to
still
define your
make it
character,
kind
what
of
you're going
urban.
for.
Well, one of the things that we're hoping to do is a lot of the utilities that you see now, for example, the ComEd poles and meters, our hope, we are working with ComEd right now, is to relocate those underground. So those would be gone. At the same time, we'd like to relocate some of the gas meters that are running willy-nilly and the piping that is rusting. So those would hopefully be moved underground in the basin as well. So the intent is to transform this industrial space similarly to how South Market Square was transformed. We don't have the building back to back, but the idea is to start now to remove those elements that make it feel industrial and bring it back to kind of a European streetscape that you feel you have on South Market Square. But it's a little different because it's a more enclosed garden feel because we have an open space on one side. So it's going to have a little different vibe than South Market Square, but the idea is to slowly transform it into a live kind of third courtyard, a little more edgier because it's a more open space and we don't have the little cute shops right next to each other, but the idea is to transform it. So that's why we're starting with the brackets and the detailing to try to bring that, raise that level of design in the elements that we can address now and slowly evolve that into a more refined alley.
Okay. I have one more question about the location of the public restroom. With the amount of middle schoolers that are attracted to Jolly Good Fellows, that public restroom might be a makeup, area and a ponytail adjusting area. With the amount of young kids that are there, Is it truly will be that?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad thing.
Okay.
It'll be, swarmed with, girls putting on makeup, I think, and I just don't know that that's a great location, don't you think? With
You're
the
talking
amount
about the bathroom?
Yeah, isn't
Well, they
it
do that
supposed to
now
be a
upstairs,
public
or at least they
public
used to do
restroom?
that upstairs at the bathroom that's at the end of the stairs.
Okay.
Yeah, when they come, in springtime, when they come down from Deer Path Middle School. Yeah.
Oh, I know. I have a middle schooler, and
Right.
they all swarm Jolly Good Fellows. So I just was wondering if
Is that a single stall?
that
But I
would
mean,
be
they
a-
need to have a place to go.
Correct.
Right,
It's
but
a,
it'll
it's
be
a single
filled with,
stall.
with middle schoolers.
It's a parent issue. They got a
Okay.
supervisor.
Yeah, that's.
One question about the stair, the second floor. You have a second means of egress out of that second floor?
We do.
I mean, it's,
Go back to the original. We're looking at a
oh, okay.
new stair in that component, which would replace a code compliant stair would replace that existing non-code compliant stair going up to an apartment.
Okay. No, I think it's a really ambitious plan. I think the pedestrian arcade is a great idea, but it ought to lead to something that has some definition. The south court is great. You can see through the windows into the shops. You have access from two areas into that courtyard, which kind of expands. So it creates a sense of place. It's a nice intimate setting. Here, it's going to be a heavier lift to create a sense of place. So that's your challenge.
There's a wrought iron on the north side. Is that the north side? North side, running that little passageway that goes between the back of the bank building and then, right there. There's a wrought iron fence there that separates it. Is that going to come down so you can have that access out to Western Avenue?
What we're proposing is actually there's a grade change there with the punch through with some stairs, so that the north side of this court could access that little alley and get out onto Western.
Yeah, Wells, I just want to comment on what you said. I mean, I think we're preaching to the choir a little bit on that, because they're the ones investing in this space to transform it. They know that it needs to be a coveted area, and that this is phase one of a foundation to then get pull from the retailers to want to punch into it. I mean, you can't make all that stuff happen, right away. And so to me, this is kind of table stakes to do that. And so our job is to, look at the character and the integrity and to just say, okay, cool. Now, there are some logistical concerns and questions we can have, but I think from the personal arcade design elements and pathway and, the courtyard itself, I'm really comfortable with the fixtures and the other things. I think it's a well thought out and compatible with the historical character of the structure. And then, the tower and the back of the building, I'm sensitive to some of the comments. So, I mean, I think.
Guys, I got to tell you, I think this is going to work big time. This is such cool space, and when you're walking in downtown Lake Forest, you go out of your way to walk through that south court. People go out of their way to walk around to make sure they go through it when they get their ice cream cone.
Right.
This is the nature of this kind of space. People are going to think it's cool. They're going to go out of their way to check it out, see what's going on. And it's just a matter of time before tenants embrace that and they start, having, this is going to take a while to realize, but it's a really good direction for us.
That's
I should note one thing. We just leased to Einstein's another extension on their lease, and we're requiring them to open to this space. And we've polled all the other tenants and asked them if they would be interested, whether we pay for it, they pay for it. That will come later. And everyone has voted that they would like to be part of that Jolly Good Fellows, so on and so forth. But Einstein's in particular, because of the lease negotiations, we negotiated it into their deal that they had to do it. So it will start immediately with our work. And they're actually working with us as we speak, and they're architects and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, that's great.
That's cool.
Great. Wow. So what about the other tenants? Are they all like Kittles, and they're okay with like a rear entry? That's
They're
gonna work for them?
more than okay. I think we've had a little bit of concern about the deliveries. You guys have brought that up, and we are dealing with that with each tenant differently. Each tenant has a different need. But I think the excitement for the alley for the tenants on the north side outweighs the concern, especially if we can take care of them with the, special permission and all of that. So.
Can I ask one question about that? And you'll be responsible for the scavenger removal of the trash and taking it to the new location?
That's correct.
They won't have to do that themselves?
That's correct. We have our own porters that move that trash. Yeah.
No, I think it's going to be a great space. I can see this in the future being such a gathering spot. I mean, little festivals. I mean, I think it's really well thought out. I think it's really exciting.
So should we move to approve the arcade and the footprint of the outdoor area? And
Are you doing that?
Table well, I'm just polling the group to see.
I would say we should, yes, I would. I would look,
And I think the
would like to-
placement of that new tower, I think that's what we were supposed to consider. I think that's the most logical, almost fits there perfectly, right?
And I think we should use the 4 project elements which have been identified by city staff and exclude the one element which we're not. That Commissioner Preschlack has suggested that we table for the time being. Or are we going to table it, or are we going to continue it? What do you think?
Let's ask Kathy that question, how administratively.
The element that would be put off is infill of second-floor balconies and stairways.
So I would, based on what I've heard, I would suggest a motion to grant a certificate of appropriateness approving the pedestrian arcade and the work necessary to create that, restoration, repair, replacement of windows, doors, general restoration on that north elevation, and the overall site plan.
Site enhancements.
Which would be landscaping, lighting, with the conditions that we'll get additional details. And then I would just provide direction to the petitioner that you support the location, the footprint of the elevator, that you'd like to see further study of the infill proposal and detailing on the elevator.
And so will the infill proposal be continued or just tabled?
I think you can simply make a motion, grant a certificate of appropriateness for the 3 items, and I think the petitioners have heard that you want detail on the others.
I'd be glad to do it, unless you want to do it, Jim.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that's up to you.
No, just
It's
want
your
to make
idea.
sure you know everyone
So,
else.
based on the findings detailed, so I would like to make a motion, Chairman.
He's dying to.
I'm not really dying to, because this is going to be a little difficult. But based on the findings detailed in the applicable staff report dated February 25th, 2015, which document that 3 of the 4 elements of the project comply with the standards in Chapter 51, Historic Preservation of the City Code, and incorporating the materials submitted and presented by the petitioner and the testimony and the deliberations of the commission at this public meeting as additional findings, I move that the commission grant a certificate of appropriateness approving restoration and enhancements to the North Court Alley area as consistent with the application and request presented to the commissioners by the petitioner, summarily incorporating the following elements. 1, creation of a new pedestrian arcade similar to the arcade from Market Square to the South Court Alley. 2, restoration, repair, and replacement of windows, doors, and wood trim on the north building facade. 3, site enhancements including landscaping, hardscaping, and lighting, but excluding the element of infill of second-floor balconies and stairways. And that this commission condition its approval on the conditions of approval enumerated in the 2 numbered paragraphs on page 12 of the applicable staff report. And C, that the commission indicate to the petitioner its non-binding conceptual approval of the location of the new elevator structure to house an entry lobby, stairway, an elevator to increase second-floor accessibility consistent with current code requirements.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Share a second.
Okay.
Seconded by Commissioner Alfe. Sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Thank you for your patience and continued investment. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Very much.
Wonderful stuff.
I'm not trying to do it. I thought I
No,
was
it's
just
fine.
trying to do a good job of it.
All right, now's an opportunity for the public to address the Historic Preservation Committee on non-agenda items, if there are any. I see none. Is there any additional information from the staff?
Nothing further,
Thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved and seconded by someone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you and good night.